I'm going to try to switch screens with my camera, so I may have to exit and then come back in. I
Okay,
apologize.
thanks for telling us. That's okay. We're still waiting for people.
Is it cold over there?
Freezing.
We're at 10 degrees this morning, so winter finally has arrived.
I know. Did you guys get snow
No,
yesterday? Oh my gosh, we got a ton.
no, the ground is bare.
Oh,
We haven't had moisture. We had the driest January for over 20 years.
yeah.
Wow.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chip.
Morning.
Okay, we have a quorum, but I'm going to just hold on for a sec while we see if we get the other two connected.
I had to put in the passcode this morning. It was,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's strict.
it is. Yeah. Tough crowd here.
There we go.
Morning, Barbara.
Morning.
Okay, I'm just going to wait until my computer says 8:05, just so you guys know.
Sounds good.
Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead. Are we recording, Chris?
Yes, everything's ready.
Okay, great. So welcome to the Community Choice Schools Commission's first quarter meeting for 2026. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. And as the chair, it is my intention that everyone present leaves today's meeting having felt engaged, productive, respected, valued, and heard. And with that said, I call this meeting to order at 8:05 a.m. on Wednesday, February 18th, 2026. That was me tapping a gavel. Okay, if everyone can unmute themselves, and we will stand for the pledge. One sec. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag
to the
of
flag
the
of the
United
United
States
States
of
of
America
America,
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it
it
stands, one nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty
and
and
justice for all.
for all.
Okay, Kathy, if you can take roll call.
Yes, Chairperson Trish Schreiber. It's always hard for me to get out.
Here.
Vice Chair John Rutt.
Here.
Treasurer Chip Lindenlaub.
Here,
Mark Huffstetler. Not yet.
Tardy, I
Dr.
think.
Katie Franklin.
Here.
Taylor Ramos.
Here.
And Barbara Forrester Frank.
Here.
Great. Okay, so the Community Choice Schools Commission encourages the public to participate in the commission discussions and points of action. People attending online should raise their hand when asked for public comment or to ask questions of guests. Anyone wishing to participate in commission discussions or considerations of action will be recognized by the chairperson in keeping with normal board parliamentary procedure. Are there any visitors online who would like to speak before we begin the business of the commission?
Madam Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to item 1, I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda, which contains the minutes from the meeting on December 9th of 2025.
I
move
move.
to-
Oh, you go ahead.
I move to adopt the consent agenda, including the minutes from the December 9th, 2025 meeting.
Great, is there a second?
I second.
Great. It's been properly moved and seconded that the commission approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Okay, 1 second. Seeing none. Okay, all those in favor say aye,
Aye.
aye,
and all those opposed say nay. Okay, the consent agenda has been passed unanimously. Is there a motion for the adoption of today's agenda?
I move to adopt today's agenda.
Great. Is there a second?
I
a
second.
second,
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded that the commission approve the adoption of today's agenda. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 aye,
All those opposed say nay. Okay, today's agenda has been approved unanimously. There we go. Okay. All right, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending. Like our last meeting, we have a lot of business to conduct today. And so I want to be sure to thank Director of Planning, Kathy Kinchlow, and the National Charter School Institute for their hard work in creating and assembling these final drafts for the commission to consider. I also want to thank the subcommittees for their participation in the creation of the policies presented in today's agenda packet. So as a reminder to the public, the commission encourages public comment while conducting business. So please use your raise hand feature to make comments after the commission has finished its discussion and before the commission takes a vote. And I will do my best to remember to ask for public comment. The chair will run the meeting a little differently today. So generally, the chair has put the commission members at ease during guest presentations. But today, the chair will strictly adhere to Robert's Rules of Order, Board Parliamentary Procedures throughout the entire meeting. And this is intended to give the commission practice. And the main difference will be that all the questions must go through the chair and all votes will be standing votes. So since we're on Zoom, that means that each member will use the raised hand feature while a vote count is taken. And this may slow us down a bit initially, but the idea is to move slow to go fast, allowing for better communication and transparency with visitors and the public. So without further ado, as chair, my intention for the day is for everyone to leave today's meeting feeling engaged, heard, productive, valued, and respected. And with that, let's see what we've got here. Business going on for agenda item 3. So for item number 3, we have a bunch of business here. And in order to open discussion on business items, a member must first make a motion. Once seconded, the commission may open discussion on the motion. So I'm going to go ahead and do the first one. So I move that the commission apply remaining funds from the 2025 Bradley Grant toward a legal retainer in order to complete the legal review work needed to ensure the commission's policies are in compliance with state and federal laws. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Chip. And I see you're raising your hand. I apologize. Okay, so I'm like having a little trouble here with my computer screen. Give me one sec. Okay, it's like making something small when I need it to be big. Okay. Great. So it has been properly moved and seconded that the commission apply remaining funds from the 2025 Bradley Grant toward a legal retainer in order to complete the legal review work needed to ensure the commission's policies are in compliance with state and federal laws. So I'm going to now open up discussion. And since I made the motion, I'm just going to go first. So I just would like to explain that the executive committee, we held back in 2025 on some of the needed legal work out of fear that we would run out of funds to pay for it because legal work really ramps up very, very quickly. And previously we had been using agency's legal service bureau, but they closed that. So now we're having to use a private lawyer, which, we chose through our normal process, but it's more expensive. So anyway, now that we've secured a second grant for 2026 and decided, along with the Special Education Consideration Subcommittee, that we will not issue an RFP to an outside consultant at this time, it goes to follow that what we need is good legal guidance. So I support this motion and hope that the rest of the commission will also. Is there any other discussion or comments or questions?
I just want to be kind of, for transparency, this is approximately $26,000, correct?
That is correct. Thank you, John. Okay, I don't see any more discussion. So is there any public comment?
Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Great, thank you. And thank you for pausing to give them time. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a vote. So the motion that we are voting on is that the commission will apply, the commission will apply remaining funds from the 2025 Bradley Grant toward a legal retainer in order to complete the legal review work needed to ensure the commission's policies are in compliance with state and federal laws. All those in favor, raise your hand. Kathy, you tell me when you're ready for the next part.
I'm ready. Thank you.
Okay, you can lower your hands. All those opposed, raise your hand. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, I'll entertain another motion.
I move that we, adopt the renewal policy.
Okay, so this is there a second?
I second it.
You're on mute, Trish. Chair Schreiber, sorry.
No idea how that happened, sorry. Okay, so it has been properly moved and seconded that the commission adopt the renewal policy. So is there any discussion? I'm jumping around screens, you guys, so I apologize. Okay, so I believe I have some discussion on here. Give me 1 second.
And Madam Chair, I see that Chip has his hand up as well.
Okay, Chip, please go first.
I was just going to say, Chair Schreiber, that your sub-policy committee went through this, and I think it's pretty thorough, and we should pass it or adopt it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, if anyone has any questions or concerns on any of this, that it comes up. Okay. So, okay, I do. So if we go to, hang on, let me get my notes here. On the renewal policy. Okay. Okay, so on page 15 of the PDF, which is the document that's titled Renewal Site Visit Preparations for the Commission. Okay, so on this, I guess my only concern, I'm still going to vote for this, but I wanted to make sure that I brought it to everyone's attention and that perhaps we have a conversation about this, is I worry that the sample agenda that has been presented here may come off as being overly prescriptive. And, I worry in chartering about isomorphism, and that will giving this sample agenda, will this be helpful to the governing boards, or will this feel stifling? Like they have to stay within this model. And my other concern is, will the commission then begin to expect that every agenda look like this, which will, which would kind of make them alarmed if a school decides to do something like in a completely different, unique way. So I just kind of want to make sure we've thought about that before we approve this.
Madam Chair, I see Katie Franklin has her
Thank you.
hand raised.
I'm so sorry. Oh, there you go. I see why I didn't see that. Katie, please.
Oh, and you are muted.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure I was looking at the same or the correct page, and making sure I'm understanding correctly. So are you,
Right.
uh, Chair Schreiber, are you talking about the renewal determination policy on
Right.
page 15 of the PDF that is outlined by month?
Right. No, I made the mistake. I am talking about, sorry, the PDF page 25. So it's
25.
the commission renewal site visit preparations. So the document, and I think the renewal
Okay.
site visit preparations. Thank you. And I'm looking at the bottom there at the sample agenda and just kind of want to make sure everyone's read through that and bring up the possibility that perhaps this might stifle boards and start to make every school look, kind of have the same approach and look the same.
Got it. So you're okay with the month, like the monthly layout.
Yeah.
So this is specifically about the agenda. Just wanted to make sure I was understanding.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I could provide some background, I would be interested in doing that as to why it was prescribed the way it was.
That would be
Okay,
great.
thank
Thank
you.
you, Kathy.
Thank you. Yeah. So I worked with Allison Murphy with the National Charter Schools Institute, and what she does is kind of when we go through this, we go through policy and then take kind of examples of other best practice that other authorizers are using. So we consulted several site visit kind of planning procedures of other authorizers to put this together. And it's very much in alignment with what we see with other authorizers. So the sample agenda being the point of that is to include basically making sure we're hearing all of the stakeholders in there. So not only the school founder and the board, but making sure that we're hearing from parents, from students, from staff as well, and just getting different samples of that. So the thinking in putting together the sample agenda was to give some guidance. And as a part of the process, it does state in there that the commission director and the school founder would work together to basically put together a final agenda, but that this is an example of how that might look to ensure that all stakeholders' voices are heard. And I can see where it would feel maybe more prescriptive than what we want, because we want schools to have autonomy, right? And freedom to run their schools the way they see fit. And I kind of see this as a different piece of that because it's the commission's responsibility to ensure that the school is, this is their oversight, right? This is the big oversight visit where the commission is coming in and wanting to be sure that they see all aspects of the school. Now, I could see that looking very different if we have a school that might be, say, offering internships for kids. Maybe we're going to the places where the students are engaged in their internships. So I think there's room for flexibility, but the idea was to provide an example of how that might look, just to ensure that the commission is seeing and hearing everything from all stakeholders.
Okay. John,
I'm gonna raise my hand.
that
So-
works for me.
I just wanted to say, it's a sample. I think it's not restrictive. It's not anything that says, well, this is the agenda and we must, use this agenda. It's a sample and it just gives the school, it gives whoever's going to review the school, it just gives them an example or that these are the things we need to do, but it's a sample. So if that doesn't apply, don't worry about it. Move on.
Okay, like make your proposal in the earlier stage when you're meeting with the director. I just want to make sure it was clear in there. Okay. Does anyone else have any other items to bring up? Katie? You're good.
Good.
Sorry. I agree with John. It's a sample, as most of the things that we are providing and creating, they're samples. And if it would be helpful, maybe even putting in just a line that says, we invite you to creatively share, yet we do want to hear from all those stakeholders because to Kathy's point, this is best practice and that we want to be comprehensive. So invite the creativity and also ensuring that they are comprehensive in the stakeholder representation.
I like that. That's a great and great piece of advice. Okay, invite creativity. Okay, anyone else? Okay, I have another part of this that I wanted us to look at as a group. So this is under, so it's page 31 of the PDF, and it's on the title of this part is called Renewal Site Visit Notes Template. So I'll give you guys all a sec to go to that. Okay, so I have a question for you, Kathy, as director. So well, I have a few of them actually. So the first one is who is filling this out?
Madam Chair, so this is filled out by the director and members of the renewal site visit subcommittee.
Okay, and on page 25, the one that we were just on, it said that this is considered pre-work that's used before they actually go to do the site visit, right? So you want them to fill it out then.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So section 1 says pre-visit preparations. So you're looking at the renewal report that was submitted, and taking that in accordance with the performance framework to basically say, here are the things that we want to focus on during the site visit.
Okay, and in visualizing this, since it's all kind of theoretical at this point, do you imagine that this is going to be on a tablet that they have access to, or on a computer, or is this going to be a hard copy? Like, what are you thinking?
I think whatever works best for the person who is using it. So if you work best on a tablet, it could be in a PDF on a tablet that you fill in, or in a Word version, or if you work best on paper and a clipboard, it could be that way. So any of the above.
Okay, so assuming we have like 4 of them, then let's say the subcommittee's 3 commission members and we have the director. So how is it going to get aggregated for a recommendation to the commission? What could we expect?
Good question. So I would envision that each member would kind of fill this out themselves, and then the subcommittee would come together to discuss ahead of the site visit. And then same thing at the end. And I'm not sure I have that step of the pre-planning collaborative meeting together in the policy, so I would double check that.
Okay, or just put it on a list of things to remember to do. It's dotting an I or crossing a T. Okay,
absolutely.
Great.
Lots of that.
Thank you. All right. Okay, there's one more I have a note here for. Let me see what I've got. I have to admit, it's a little hard to manage all the materials of the agenda packet while we're on Zoom. Like, I think in person, this would be easier. Okay, but let's see what I have here. So,
Barbara has a question.
thank you. Barbara.
I was just wondering, I noticed on this that it says area of concern, but what if the report you were actually wanting to look for some area of, there was like no place to look for something innovative or successful. This is just concern focused, so I'm just wondering where you would be looking for and noting those innovations that are happening in these schools that you're looking for in the renewal.
I think that is a great point to mention. Sure. What we want to see the success in action as well, right? And I'm just kind of scrolling through the rest of this to see here.
I feel like there's a page that says something about the mission alignment or something like that.
There it is.
Yep. That they're supposed to point out. Okay.
Page 33 does have evidence of the mission in practice. So I think that would be more of the innovative piece. There's also observations of school culture.
I just think in that area of focus, it would be nice to have something that you're positive that you're focused on as well, so that you're not just, if you're doing, because I would anticipate you're doing this pre-visit, and if we're setting our focus, let's say I'm on that group to look for concerns, we're going to miss some positives. So there's got to be things that you would glean from their renewal application that would be positives. So I would love to see somewhere in that, when you're pre-planning, that you're also framing some good things that you're looking for, because our hope would be that these schools are doing really great things. So that would just be my suggestion, to really specifically call out areas of success that you want to look at or innovation.
Thank you, Barbara. I think that's great. And I think what we should do here is, Kathy, I know you're taking extensive notes, and I just want to remind everyone that every single policy that we're passing or denying or amending or whatever is only until the next meeting, right? It can always be brought back onto the agenda by request very easily. So let's say in moving forward, Kathy, you'll kind of put this on your to-do list. And then when it's time for us to look at it again, we can just look at it again at another meeting rather than making amendments that are super specific. I think that would be easier. Katie Franklin.
I was thinking about the original applications and how these schools will be outlining goals and targets. And I'm wondering if we could have or integrate a template where there's like a plug and play where we put in those targets or those identified objectives. And then that's actually, we're looking at those things. Like, are they doing what they said they were going to do? Are they meeting those targets? And I know that is being reviewed, but I think like a specific template that it could be plugged in and then we actually are looking at may be helpful in the renewal evaluation.
That's great. And Kathy, add to this if I don't hit it all, but one of the things we have to remember is this renewal application is happening at the end of their charter contract. So we have 4 years of performance frameworks that in fact have all of the goals and everything. And so it's a way of kind of looking at an overview of it. But Kathy, I'm presuming a performance framework is part of this, like what they'll have available for that 5th year, and it might be partial.
Yes, yes. So Madam Chair and Member Franklin, I'm trying to scroll to the page in the packet here. As you said, it's a little tough to navigate, but if you go to page 17, you see the renewal performance report. That's the cover page of
Hang on,
it.
give
So
us
this
just a
is
sec
okay.
to get to
Yep.
page 17.
Give you a second to get there.
I'm
So-
seeing it, Kathy.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'll
Thank
just kind of speak to that a little bit, but basically it's kind of a 3-4 step process. But first step in the process is the commission issues to the school this performance report that's based on the performance framework, which is exactly what you said, Member Franklin, with all of the goals that the school has set out in the contract and the original performance framework. So it gives the year by year accomplishments, and then so this happens first. This goes to the school. The school gets 60 or 90 days, 90 days to review this and to submit any additional information or clarify any information, comes back to the commission. Then we go to the site visit. And then after that, the school submits to us a final renewal report. So they're kind of telling us, here's what we feel like we did really well, and that's in the packet as well. And then here is what we plan to improve for the next charter cycle, et cetera. So.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, does anyone who's visiting have any comments to add to our discussion about the Commission School Renewal Determination Guidebook? Or the renewal policy?
Madam Chair, are you asking for public comment?
Yes, sorry.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and vote for the motion. Again, we'll raise our hands. So give me just 1 second, sorry. Okay, so all those in favor of the commission adopting the renewal policy, raise your hand. Okay, there's Taylor. Okay. And all those opposed, raise your hand. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, is there another motion?
I make a motion that we approve the school corrective action intervention guidebook. And that, for reference, is page 48 of our agenda packet.
Okay, I second that. So it has been properly moved and seconded that the commission adopt the corrective action intervention procedures. Is there any discussion on this part, on this policy? Okay, I have a comment. Let's see. It looks like it's on page 39 of the PDF. Give everyone a sec to go there. Oh yeah. Okay. So this is just a technical thing, Kathy, and I apologize I didn't catch this before, but on this table of contents, so it lists. Okay, so the whole document is called the Renewal Application Guide for Schools. So this is a guide. We want it to help guide them in this process of all this paperwork that they have to do. But I noticed that under section 5, then you say school renewal application template, and there's no sections there listed in the table of contents. However, when you go to the document, which is on page 44 of the PDF, we have 3 sections and 2 appendices. So I was just thinking that those should be on the table of contents so it's consistent. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes, please.
I believe we've already approved that, and that we moved on to the school corrective action.
Am I on the wrong? Hang on.
Yes. We're in page 48 already.
I see what's happened on my notes. I waited to, you're exactly right. Thank you, John. It's good. I apologize. Okay, let me look at my other notes. I went to my wrong notes. Page 48 is where the thing starts. Okay, so corrective action. Okay, there was a little thing I saw here too. Hang on one sec. So page 49. Okay, right. All right. So if we go to page 49 of the agenda packet, and the title of this document is Corrective Action Intervention Process. Barbara, did you just raise your hand? No, okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so here, and this is a question, I guess for the policy committee, and for Kathy, whoever would like to respond to this. So on number 4, the very last sentence, it says the school leadership team and governing board will complete the rest of the correction action plan, submitting it to the commission director within 3 business days. And this same 3 business days also comes up on page 54 of this policy, or within the PDF. So it's really these 2 places. And I just want to ask, like, is this enough time to really be intentional in responding to something this serious? Like, what was your guys' thinking in doing that?
I believe we were thinking about that we need to see a commitment by the charter school that they may not have a full-fledged plan because they maybe weren't aware that there was such a problem, but that they are at least that they've maybe appointed somebody that, you know, this is mainly just, let's get the ball rolling. We understand that your concerns are, let's move along. And that was, I think, what the 3-day limit was to keep the process moving. Mostly it's just something to show that they accept that there may be a problem or defend that there may be a problem. But it keeps the ball moving forward so that we as an authorizer can discuss, you know, or maybe agree to disagree to start the process going.
Okay.
If we allowed, we talked about longer periods of time, but I think everybody wants to just keep it moving along. And more than likely, if we start a process for corrective action, they're gonna already know they got a problem.
I guess that was my question too. Like, there will have been discussions leading up to this 3 days. So it's not going to like come out of nowhere, right? I mean,
Right.
we will have known this as authorizers paying close attention.
Right.
Okay.
That was,
Chair,
maybe Chip and Kathy can tell me whether I was, but I think that's what I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, that's well, that was my thought too, is we wanted to get the action move in the right direction, I guess. And I don't think there was any intent that it couldn't be adjusted as it went along, but we just wanted the school
Right.
to say, yeah, we realize we have a problem and we're going to start to try to fix it by doing X.
Right. That makes sense. And it's not like it's in statute. It's really like, this is what we would like to see happen quickly because these are kids we're talking about. This is super important. And if we have to do this and it turns out 3 days isn't enough, I mean, we're not like out of compliance with the law. We're just doing our best, I guess. Kathy, do you want to add to that?
yes, Madam Chair, I would. So yeah, I think it's honoring that sense of urgency that, you know, if we've made it to corrective action, we definitely have an issue that needs to be taken seriously. And I think it's, you know, honoring that sense of urgency to get a plan in place. I would note that after that 3 days, it does come to the commission for review. And if the commission determines it's inadequate or anything, then it is given back and there is more time to, you know, after a review, make it more thorough. But also I would say, you know, once you've hit corrective action, you've already been through like the indicators of distress. So as Member Rutt and Member Lindenlaw were speaking to, it's, you know, at this point, we know we have an issue. And, you know, if the commission is having to push you to, you know, to get a plan together, I think that is a little concerning. So the 3 days, I think, just kind of honors that. Yeah, we know we have an issue and it's time to get a formal plan together.
Okay.
And it should be
great.
priority for the school at that point.
Okay. Great. And then again, just kind of the same question about number 5, about the 2-day turnaround. And that's
Yeah.
really administrative turnaround. So like, you're sure you think that that's the right amount of time? Okay. All right. Katie.
I don't know if this is the appropriate place to make this suggestion. However, I think it's really important. I'm wondering, and this is to Kathy and to the subcommittee, I'm wondering if this would be the place to also to create or put a template for a means for schools to communicate corrective actions that needed to be taken within the school that we didn't know about, to communicate that to us, not only to their governing board, but to the commission. You know, if that's like firing a teacher, or if there was something that happened within the school that is of concern of this nature, where corrective action needed to be taken, where we need to know about it. And then where is that line? Or do we have a mechanism of communication here? Does that make sense?
It almost makes sense to me. Can you maybe just rephrase it one more time, or just say what you just said again so I can hear it twice, because I don't quite understand the question.
Yeah. So what I am looking for, like from a zoomed out perspective, is a mechanism for a school and their governing board to communicate to the commission if corrective action was taken in the school that we don't already know about. Like if something happened in the school, there was a crisis, there was an intervention, there was abuse, there was something that happened, that there is a mechanism for communication from the school through their board to the commission. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. Okay. Now I see what you're saying.
And I don't know if this is the appropriate place to put it. However, I think that this is in that vein of corrective action. And so I'm wondering if this is where we just create that template. And Barbara, I see you nodding too. So I'm curious I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Really quick before Barbara, though, before you add to that, I'm thinking Kathy and or Chip, don't we have, I'm kind of blanking in the meeting of the in the moment of the meeting, so I apologize. I need support here. But isn't it in the law that if something like that were to happen, that they do need to notify the authorizer? But I think Katie is right that maybe we haven't built out a mechanism for that or a policy for that. Turn it over to you, Kathy.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Member Franklin, we actually do have this. I was able to pull it up here. Yay.
Fantastic.
It is in our commission annual reporting requirements for schools.
Right. Okay.
That it would go through Epicenter, and in here I've got just a few examples. The discipline of employees, any changes to current board membership, any complaints filed against the school, conditions that might cause the school to vary from terms of the contract, circumstances requiring unexpected closure to the school, et cetera, et cetera. So we do have that outlined in our commission annual reporting calendar. And I think we will add that because I think we've got that pretty much finalized for our April meeting agenda. Would be good to look at that together.
And then 1 second, Katie. And then in addition to that, isn't there a timeline like within blank days?
Yes.
And that's in
Correct.
law. That's in
Yes.
MC. Okay, got
Yeah.
it. Katie.
So some of it is within 24 hours or within 14 days. I'm seeing here on the list. Yes.
Great.
Perfect. That was my question, Trish, about the
Okay,
time.
terrific. Barbara, would you like to add to this discussion? You sure? Okay.
Yeah, I think that was good. It's in there, so I'm happy with
Excellent.
that.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, are there any attendees that would like to make public comment about this discussion before the commission has a vote?
Not seeing any hands raised, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and we are on the corrective action. Okay, so all those in favor of the commission adopting the corrective action intervention procedures, raise your hand. Okay, and all those opposed? Okay, seeing none, motion passes. Are we good, Kathy?
We are good. Katie had her
shaking
hand
your
up for a
hand.
second, but we're good. Katie had popped
I
her
forgot
hand
to
up.
lower
but
my hand. Sorry.
Got
canceled
it. Okay. Okay. Okay, it's time to entertain another motion.
Madam Chair, I recommend that I make a motion rather that we adopt the revocation policy.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second that.
Thank you, John. So it has been properly moved and seconded that the commission adopt the revocation policy. Is there any discussion?
For reference, that's page 68 in our agenda packet.
Thank you. Okay. I'm just going to go there to see if I have any notes here. And I apologize, I'm looking down, so I'm not looking up at my Zoom screen, but I promise to look back in just a sec here. Okay. Okay, Katie. Oops, you're on mute.
Thanks, Trish. I have a question. I'm wondering if there is a description somewhere that I'm not seeing about what a revocation hearing would look like, or the structure or format of that.
Yes.
And if it's described somewhere.
Okay. Kathy, do you want to take that?
Sure, Madam Chair. Yeah, Member Franklin. I guess if you look at the revocation process number 2, and this is out of statute, the charter contract holders maybe, well, yeah, if you just read number 2 there, the commission will provide the charter contract holders.
Can you
an
tell us what
opportunity
page you're on, Kathy?
I'm sorry, page 69.
Okay. Oh, got it. Okay.
So it describes the
two.
hearing there. The commission will provide the charter contract holders an opportunity to submit documents and testimony at a hearing to challenge the rationale for revocation recommended and in support of continuation of the school. They may be represented by counsel and call in witnesses. Recordings are proceeded, as are all open meeting laws. And then the commission will arrange a date for the hearing within 5 days of the decision to open a hearing. Is there
Great.
anything else that you would want to include in that?
Yeah. I was going to say, so basically it's an open meeting and our agenda would fit this description. Go ahead, Katie.
So as part of that, and thank you, Kathy, as part of that, is it important to put in there that the commission would have council representation or consultation as well? And then do we need to find, oh, it's there, right there. The final determination, is that done by a vote with commission members? I'm just wanting, like, just making sure that we have clarity and like, it's really procedural.
Right. So in number 3, it says that the final determination. So the commission will deliberate and take action as the final step in the hearing. So the hearing will abide by Montana's MCA open meeting laws. So that means we would be releasing an agenda to the public in advance of the hearing. According to MCA in the Community Choice Schools Act, the school has the right to counsel and extra documents and things like that. Again, presuming we've looked at all of this, but we're still doing this meeting in a public format. There would be public comment. Everything would be according to code. You bring up a good point about the commission having counsel there too. And we don't have it written in here, but that's a really good point. We definitely should have that in here. Yeah, and again, we could do it anyway. We would have the right to have counsel at any one of our meetings that we should, want that, but why not put it in there? I think that's a good idea.
Do we think it's important, or is it just already kind of inherent in saying that it will abide by Montana's open meeting laws? But do we need to say it's by vote of the commission?
Well, when it says that they'll deliberate and take action, that's what that means.
Okay. I just was wondering if we need to
No,
spell that out.
Yeah, taking action is having a vote. And so that is, and I mean, maybe we could take the final step saying that it would be, majority of the quorum or something would be the deciding factor. I mean, I don't know.
It may be helpful to just put that language in there so schools understand the process. And I just don't want anyone to make assumptions.
I like it that you're pointing it out that people might be stressed during this time period and will likely need to be following something very specifically. Okay.
And transparency in the process, then it's a process and it's not personal.
Perfect. I like that. Anyone else? Okay. Let me look at the list here. Okay, is there any public comment on the Commission's Charter Revocation Guidebook?
Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote. So, all those in favor of the Commission adopting the revocation policy as presented in the agenda packet, raise your hand to say aye. Okay, all those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, I believe we have one more piece of business. So is there a motion?
I make a motion to adopt the closure policy, which starts on page 72 of our agenda packet.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, it has been properly moved and seconded that the commission adopt the closure policy as presented on page 72 of the agenda packet. Is there any discussion? Okay, I just want to say that if you go to page 84 of the packet, here I'm going there myself, which is where we have the FAQ. I just want to note, and Kathy, please confirm this. This is my presumption that this is a document that's going to grow. Like we're going to have more frequently asked questions than just that.
Yes, Madam Chair, I think as we experience this and get questions, that would be wise just to add those to the list as well. And, yeah, an ongoing document. And I also
Okay.
see Member Linden Lobb has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Chip.
Chair Schreiber, I just, one of my concerns with this was that there's a lot to be done in the first 24 hours by our director, but she assures me it's no problem.
Okay, well, you bring up a good point, and that was my question too. So Kathy, I wanted to ask you, like, yes, I could see that you would be thinking this with all of your experience under the presumption that you would be the director during this process. However, we don't have access to a law yet. We don't have any schools yet. It would be 5 years along the line. Well, it could happen anytime during the procedure. It could happen in the first year or whatever. So if this were another person who maybe didn't have as much experience and was doing this for the first time, do you feel that's pigeonholing them into a time period that they couldn't respond to? Or do you feel that we would have the documents ready and the pathway paved, that it would be like we talked about in the last one? Like, could they meet that? Go ahead.
I think if
Bob,
you,
Kathy,
yeah.
then I'll ask you.
Yeah, thank you. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items that would happen within the 24 hours of closure, and they're all completing a template. So it's a letter of communication to staff, to families, to et cetera, some talking points, things like that. So they're all templates that have been built out, and basically it's just putting in the customized information to that situation, which I would think a well-prepared director would, have that at least drafted ahead of time, knowing that this was coming and there was a very tight turnaround on those. So that was my perspective. And then there are a few other items that happen within 48 hours. And I think, the idea here is that the vote of a closure would occur in a public meeting. And so the information is out there, right? And so not to create panic, you want to communicate as quickly as possible to all of the stakeholders that, yes, we have a plan, and the plan will begin immediately so that we have a smooth transition throughout the closure.
Okay, John, did you want to add to that?
I agree. We discussed this quite a bit when we were, reviewing this, and it was mainly just filling out the templates. And like Kathy said, this would not be a shock to anybody at this point in time. If we get to this point, it will be discussed and cussed and all kinds of things. So I believe that for the most part, yeah, the paperwork will probably be done before the 24-hour clock starts.
Okay, and then before I call on you, Chip, I just wanted to provide another push point here. What if this were an immediate revocation due to the safety of the children? Like if this were some kind of an egregious violation that were happening that we found out about and we needed to do this right away? I mean, Kathy, do you think the same answer holds?
I do, being that they are templates in the first 24 hours. You want to be obviously careful about, how you're framing this and considering it, but a lot of it is just, customizing letters. So and again, with the urgency, and I think 24 hours is appropriate.
Okay. Okay. Chip, I am going to call on you, but first I'm going to call on Katie since you've said something already. Go ahead, Katie.
Oh, I just agree with Kathy.
Perfect. Thank you. Chip?
Well, I feel silly now because that's all I was going to say was I do understand the urgency of getting all this done within 24 hours. And Kathy's right. The templates developed are pretty easy to fill in. And, there'll be a lot of people waiting to hear what's going on. And I think it's important So I see both sides of the coin is what I'm trying to say. I do see the sense of urgency that everyone has to be notified as soon as possible.
Right. And as we have this discussion, I see that too. It's super obvious. Like, of course, these are families and children and teachers who have jobs that we are talking about that really need to have answers right away and for this to move quickly. Okay. Anything else? Is there any public comment on this discussion or the motion?
Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, I'm laughing because I find myself looking at the attendee list when I ask that as if they can see me. Looking at them. Okay, thank you. So let's go back to the motion. Okay, for the vote. So all those in favor of the commission adopting the closure policy as presented in the agenda packet, raise your hand. 6. Okay. There are none opposed because it's unanimous, so the motion passes. Thank you, you guys. Okay. I'm just taking a time check here. Okay, we're about 15 minutes behind, but I think we're okay. Do we have our presenters in the waiting room? Everyone's ready to go? Okay, so let's move on
Yes.
to item 4. McCall, if you can advance our participants and our presenters, I should say. So just really quickly, I want to say the Solomon Group was hired through a rigorous RFP process administered by the Department of Administration and with the help of the Board of Public Education. Chris Stockton, Kathy Kinchlow, and myself participated as a working group team in deciding to work with the Solomon Group per the scope of work that we put out there. And to simplify, the commission sought consulting services on how to create and implement policy related to the option of a founding group, or in other words, a choice school applicant, to propose their own preferred annual assessment to measure academic proficiency and growth during the application phase of the charter cycle. So as a quick reminder, the commission members are encouraged to ask questions, as is the public, and to fully engage during this discussion and training while adhering to Robert's Rules of Order, board parliamentary procedure, meaning questions should go through the chair. Okay, so, and with that, I would like to welcome Dr. William Sullivan, psychometrician, and Joe Marr, project director from the Solomon Group Research Associates. You guys can take it away.
Nice to see everybody. Good to be with you today. I'm going to share my screen. I have a presentation for us, and we'll get started. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure. And really quick, I'm just scrolling through my agenda packet. If anyone can shout out, what page does the Solomon stuff start on? It's towards the end.
Page 91, Madam Chair.
There it is, 91. Okay, thank you. I want everyone to be able to get there.
Okay, cool.
Okay, Joe, we're ready.
Thank you. So some of the stuff, I'll guide you over to that too, but page 67 of the report we produced is actually where the relevant portion of the law is. And so that might be how I'm going to include it in the presentation as well, but it's also good context to have. So maybe if you had that able to quickly flip there, that might be
Right.
beneficial,
So,
but
Joe,
ahead.
just to give you a little warning. So since we're on Zoom, it's always a little awkward with our materials that we have,
Sure.
because it's like we have our computers and we have it downloaded on our computer or tablet or something. But just to let you know, one of the main issues is that the agenda packet, so this was your presentation was included, your report in our agenda packet. So your title page for us is actually page 91 of our agenda packet.
Okay.
So just, we might be a little slow when you're directing us to pages.
Problem.
And okay. And I want to give the commission permission at this point. I just said we're going to be in board parliamentary procedure, but this is the one exception. Whoever finds the page first can shout it out to everyone else. Okay, just let that be known. Okay, go ahead. We're good.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Okay. Well, thank you for having us. It's been a collaborative and a productive process since I believe we started this work in October, at the end of October. So again, it's been great working with Madam Chair and Madam Director, and so happy to be here with you to discuss our recommendations and our report. So we will start with some introductions. So my name's Joe Marr. I'm one of the co-founders of Solomon Research and Analytics. So before my time with Solomon, Bill and I both worked in charter school authorizing. So I kind of came up in charter school authorizing. I started as an analyst and then was an evaluation manager and ultimately a director of research, evaluation, and data analytics for a large charter school authorizer in Michigan. We started Solomon Research and Analytics, and we really help folks with exactly this type of thing, sorting through school evaluation and the law as it pertains to charter schools, as well as helping people with the reporting and the data end and the implications of the law and the reporting requirements. So we were really excited to work with you all. I'll let my co-founder Bill Sullivan introduce himself.
Thanks, Joe. I'll be really brief so we can get to all the good stuff. But Joe and I have been working together for, I think, 10, 12 years now almost. But we met in grad school in a previous program in economics, and then moved on to measurement and quantitative methods at Michigan State University. And I've done a lot of work with Joe and with the John Engler Center for Charter Schools in the state of Michigan, which is housed at Central Michigan University. And I've also done some work with Michigan State University and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is a mouthful, the OECD. If you're familiar with PISA, and when we find out how we rank in mathematics across the world, that's who runs that program. So I've done a lot of work around mathematics education and curriculum, and particularly in assessment and how we align what we want students to know and to learn with how we measure those things. And so we're bringing a lot of that kind of lens to part of this process, so we can look at like what your schools want to be able to teach, and then how well are we going to be able to assess that. So that's a little bit of a relevant background for us, but I'll hand it back to you, Joe.
Thanks, Bill. We were curious, we talked, Madam Chair and Madam Director, about maybe getting a introduction to the commission members before we started that. Is that still okay, Madam Chair?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that is a great idea. So since Kathy and myself, we're going to go ahead and skip. So I want to actually start with McCall Flynn, who is the executive director of the Board of Public Education. Go ahead, McCall.
Hey everyone, I'm the executive director at the Board of Public Ed. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I love it. Okay, and I'm just going in order on my Zoom screen. Okay, you guys. So Chip, that makes you next. Give a little background.
Chip Lindenlaub. I'm a retired pilot. His dad was a public school teacher and had an interest in education, got involved with passing the legislation to bring the Community Choice Schools Act to Montana, and happy to be here.
Thank you. Katie?
Hi there, my name's Katie Franklin. I've been a licensed school counselor in LCPC in Montana for over 20 years. I'm a professor at Montana State University. I run the school counseling graduate program, and I'm the director for the Center of Mental Health Research and Recovery. And it's important to say I'm a state employee, and my participation here is as a citizen, not as a representative of Montana State University.
Thank you, Katie. And that goes for all of us. We're all acting as volunteers, other than Kathy, who is our team leader and our employee. Okay, Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara Forrester Frank. I am from Missoula, and I'm a lifelong educator, mother of 4, mother of an aspiring pilot. Just thought I'd add that since we have a retired pilot on here. So excited to be here and learn more.
John?
I'm John Rutt. I'm from down south central Montana, Laurel, just outside of Billings. Semi-retired all of my kids went to public schools, but my grandkids go to our homeschooled and classical conversation type schooling. So I became very interested in this 3-4 years ago, and my wife saw an opportunity that she said, you ought to fill out that application and see if they'll choose you for that commission. And I thought, yeah, right. And here I am. So I was appointed by the superintendent of schools be 2.5 years ago.
Thank you, John. And then I'm going to call on you in just a second, Taylor, but I realized that in my chair introduction, I failed to let everyone know that Taylor is with us today, but because we are all volunteers and we're on Zoom so that we can all be here, we agreed that Taylor should have her camera off today just because she's at home and couldn't control the background environment, but she's going to give herself a little introduction here. Thank you, Taylor. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Taylor Ramos. Well, you guys can hear me. Okay. I am a stay-at-home mom. I live in Missoula. I'm not sure what else I should add, but this is Stockton. He's joining us today too. So
thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Okay. Did I forget anyone? No, I think I'm good. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. So just to, give you a little bit of detail about us too, we're coming to you from the middle of Michigan. So we use our hand around here to show you where we're at. That's kind of the very middle near Lansing, just outside the capital. Bill's a father of two, one school age still, and then I'm a father of four. A couple of them are school age, and a couple of them are before school. So, we've been involved in the education space for some time. It's important to us, and the work that you all are doing is very, very important for the state of Montana. So we're just glad to be here, and thank you for the introductions. On today's agenda, so.
Joe, I'm sorry, can I interrupt you just one second? Are you still sharing your screen? Because my Zoom went back to gallery.
Yes, I am still sharing.
Okay, it's technical difficulties on my side. I'll figure it out. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So the agenda for today, we have kind of an executive summary we'll start with. So, that's going to cover really what the objectives of the work that we are doing with Kathy and with Madam Chair kind of covered to begin with. So what were our objectives, what were our deliverables, and then kind of some of the outcomes in an executive summary format. Then we'll move on to this kind of follows the trail or follows the path that we took to get where we are, even in our work over the last few months. A policy overview, so really focusing on some of the relevant sections and some of the real key words that kind of were highlighted for us as technical experts in assessment. We'll talk a little bit about assessment foundations, and you'll see these kinds of things are the kinds that you'll see all throughout the report as well. So some assessment foundations before we talk about the recommended assessments, and then some of their strengths and weaknesses. We'll talk about also within that kind of before the considerations and implications piece, we'll also talk about the flexibility and autonomy that the law allows for choice schools and some of the materials that we produced for that, and in addition to the recommended assessments. And then we'll move on to some considerations and implications. So, I know you all have had a lot of discussions about policy interpretations. I think I use the word legal in here. Maybe it's more like practical interpretations at this point. And then some data and reporting considerations as you think about these recommended assessments, the other assessments that a choice school may propose, and the implications on things like reporting timelines and validation processes and all of those things that kind of go from where it goes from kind of theory to application. So as we'll start with the executive summary. So the purpose here was, we really got brought on board to identify some assessments that meet the statutory requirements. Along with that, we also developed some tools for the commission to evaluate any proposed assessments. So we see this as, you know, a collaborative approach, even in this application process, or in this, you know, even in this process of communication between you, the commission, the authorizer, and the choice school. And so with that collaborative approach, there's, you know, it makes sense to have a solid set of assessments that are kind of pre-approved and can move through the process smoothly. But then also there's this ability for schools to propose other assessments. And so with these deliverables, we kind of hit both of those components. We have 4 recommended assessments that are approved for use. It's not, or that, you know, we recommend you approve for use. It's not an exhaustive list. It's not all the assessments out there that could possibly become approved based on the statutory requirements, but they're good examples. They're solid tools that we see many people across the country using, or across the state. And then we also provide a practical checklist to help the commission and those evaluating a choice schools application and their assessment recommendations or applications against this practical checklist to help the commission make a decision on whether it's appropriate or not. And then also a decision matrix to help with those discussions and be able to highlight strengths and weaknesses of a proposed assessment. So as we kind of shift over to the policy overview, so the Act establishes a performance-based accountability framework for charter schools in Montana, and it sets clear expectations for components that must be included in a choice schools performance framework. You know, as we were looking at this as assessment experts, one of the key components that we looked at was this point 3A, which is on the right side of this slide, which the contract performance framework must include rigorous, valid, and reliable indicators proposed by a choice school to evaluate its performance that are consistent with the purposes of this part. So as assessment experts, the words that jump out in that section is valid and reliable specifically. Rigorous is a little bit more of a subjective term that, you know, people discuss and have good faith discussions about rigor. Valid and reliable tend to be more technical terms in the assessment space. And so as we were looking and kind of preparing a set of recommended assessments, and as we were looking and creating something like the checklist, we wanted to focus and make sure that we got these two words included in there: validity and reliability. And so what we see there is that schools, you know, have the ability to propose, and you know, as we've continued our discussions, we see that choice schools are likely to propose the measures by which they will be evaluated on an interim basis. So the law, you know, talks about some annual targets, collaboratively developing those, and the commission allows a lot of autonomy. The law allows a lot of autonomy, and the commission ensures those proposals meet those statutory requirements: validity, reliability, and some of the other components we're going to talk about in a second. And those are really the technical standards. So from a technical perspective, we're looking for valid and reliable assessments that also support subgroup comparisons when we talk about the law. So in that first, kind of the very top of the law, that section 1 or subsection 1 of 117, it has all of these performance provisions. The 4 that are really relevant to assessment are the ones highlighted and kind of, you know, prominent on the screen. There's student academic proficiency, student academic growth, achievement gaps across subgroups, and post-secondary readiness. So as we were, and as the commission continues to evaluate assessments that are proposed by choice schools or adopted by choice schools, these are the kinds of things that in the law are the specific things in the law that need to be able to be present: is academic proficiency, academic growth, achievement gaps across subgroups, and post-secondary readiness.
Okay, Joe, really quick, we have a question from Chip.
Sure.
Yeah,
Chip?
I'm sorry. I just want to say, I'm not seeing your slides, or are we just looking at the law now?
Nope. Yeah, I should
There's
be
slide.
shared. I'm going to share
Yeah, you were
again.
sharing. Chip, what
Okay.
I found is on my particular Zoom screen, if I go to the very top, there's a bar and it says webinar or it says Joe Mars screen. And I had to hit
Okay.
that.
Okay.
And then it puts
Got
the
it.
commission in gallery mode. Did that help?
Thank you very much.
Okay,
That
cool.
did it. I
Awesome.
apologize. Thank
Okay,
you.
Okay, cool.
thanks.
No
'Cause
problem.
I was sitting there thinking, Joe, are we going to be able to get copies of these slides afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
I think that would be terrific because I love the visual. It's easier to look at this slide than it actually is to look at code, which I have right here
Sure.
next to me. But I like that. Thank you.
Okay, cool. No problem. Yeah, I'd be happy to provide them.
Okay, great.
Joe, I can send those. So no worries. I've got your copy. I'll send it to them.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Okay.
Well, I added a couple logos and stuff, Kathy. So I'll send you the brand new one. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
No problem. So when we see, so again, these kind of 4 components are the 4 relevant assessment components. The additional required components are important, and we're going to kind of talk about those in the considerations and implications at the end, because there's additional required components that must be included, like attendance and recurrent enrollment and financial performance and board governance. And I think that all kind of gets wrapped up into what data stewardship and ownership looks like as a consideration and implication at the end. And so those kind of 4 things are the things we're making sure. So like if we look at it kind of like a funnel, you have validity and reliability at the top of that funnel. And then specifically, we're looking at valid and reliable proficiency and growth. Proficiency being like a student's ability to demonstrate their performance against a set standard, growth being their change over time or between assessments, achievement gaps across subgroups, looking at the performance of the whole to the performance of a subgroup or comparing subgroup performance together, and post-secondary readiness being primarily a high school measure. So in order to discuss assessments specifically, we want to set a good foundation. And so we're going to talk about the assessment foundations that were really foundational for this project. So we have kind of, again, if we look at it almost like a funnel, we have, you tend to have a couple of different types of assessments, criterion referenced or norm referenced. We tried to, in our recommendations, pull assessments that we feel good about that fall in each of these buckets, so that schools also have a choice in that, or at least the commission has an example of approved assessments in each one of these things. So, a criterion reference assessment measures performance against fixed standards and determines mastery or proficiency, where a norm referenced assessment compares performance to a representative peer group. A lot of times, even a criterion referenced assessment will have a normed component to it. And one of my old bosses quite a few years ago used to say something that has stuck with me for quite a few years. And it's that if you scratch a criterion, you'll find a norm. So they're very much related in a way, in that when we talk about what kinds of things a fifth grader should have mastered in mathematics, by the very nature of that discussion about what a fifth grader should know, you're talking about other fifth graders, that norm referenced group. So there's very much an interplay between criterion referenced and norm referenced. When we talk about something like validity, we're looking for evidence that test scores support accurate interpretations for the intended purpose. So this is kind of the very top layer of the discussion about an assessment is there validity? And without validity, there's no reliability. Reliability being consistency, stability, and precision of the test scores across administrations. So when we see that included in the law, those are the kind of things that we're using to define those terms. The alignment piece is the
Joe, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second and
yes,
just
Madam
say,
Chair.
for the members and attendees who are watching this, kind of the easiest way to think about validity is the test testing what it says it is testing? So it just kind of helps you wrap your head around that. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. The alignment really is the correspondence between the curriculum, standards, the instruction, and the assessment. That we're looking for that in a really good assessment package, as it fits the context of the school, and the choice school is able to articulate the alignment between what they're assessing and what's being taught in the classroom and what's being proposed on the curriculum. Equity and differential item functioning. So this is more of a technical equity and process than it is kind of the more current discussion around equity. But so I'd like to kind of define it for you as we talk about this equity and diff. So this equity that we're talking about in this context for an assessment foundation is that assessment companies, as part of kind of an industry standard, should be ensuring that the assessment questions function fairly across demographic subgroups. And so I'll give you an example. So let's say we have like Joe from rural Michigan and Bill from, let's say, inner city New York City. And on an assessment, there's a question about volume of a fertilizer tank. If Joe grew up on a farm, he's going to have a lot more contextual information about that question than somebody like Bill who grew up in New York City. And for that reason, there could be some difference in the probability that Joe and Bill get that question correct. And so those are the types of things that we mean when we say equity in this context is the probability that Joe from rural Michigan and Bill from inner city New York, is the probability the same that they get these questions correct, or is there a difference? And if there's a difference, then companies go through, or assessment vendors go through a process called differential item functioning, where they take these items, these questions, and they submit them back to subject matter experts to try and either reform the language or the story, the context of the item, so that it is more neutral to experience, like rural versus urban. And then they resubmit those questions out for testing to make sure those probabilities are about the same. And so those are very important pieces as we talk about the assessments that we ultimately recommended for the commission. And so we're going to move on to discuss that. And there we go. Now I messed up my Zoom view. So
take your time.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's see. Okay. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So now we're headed into our recommended assessments. And again, so this list isn't exhaustive of all the assessments that could meet the criteria within the law. But these are assessments that we see, especially the top two that are popular across the country, that, in our experience, we've seen a lot of educators, a lot of school leaders, a lot of authorizers really appreciate the information that comes out of these platforms. So those are kind of the top two. And then the
Really
bottom
quick,
two.
I just want to let the commission
Sure.
members know that in the agenda packet, these are listed on PDF page 97, which is also page 5 of their summary report if you have a printed copy.
Thanks, Trish.
Sure, thank you.
So I'm going to go through all 4 of them, and then I'll share with you the strategy behind picking 2 kind of outside ones, and then 2 that are part of the Montana comprehensive assessment program. So the top one is NWEA map growth. So this is a norm referenced assessment. A lot of people really like NWEA because they have a very strong growth model with conditional growth percentiles. So by conditional growth percentiles, what we mean is that it compares students of like ability and their performance over time. So you can look at things like, a conditional growth percentile would be like how Joe, a fifth grade student who scores at the 60th percentile, so better than 60% of his peers in fifth grade, changes from the fall to the spring. So you can look at that kind of point-to-point comparison. It's norm referenced, so they have a very large sample. I believe it's the largest in the industry of about 15 million student observations to create their norming study. So when you're talking about a comparison to like a national normed peer group, then NWEA is a very, very just kind of a titan in that space. The next assessment is the iReady diagnostic. So I will say the iReady diagnostic is changing names to iReady Inform in 26-27. They just kind of rolled out that information on their website. And what you'll see too is that those things change over time. Growth models change over time, norms change over time. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But the iReady diagnostic is primarily a criterion referenced assessment, though they do have a growth model and a pretty good one at that. But it provides detailed skill development data. And also one of the big things that we tend to hear people really like about iReady is the stretch growth goals. One of the things with growth that's always, a matter of controversy and discussion is that, if you have a student like Joe who in fourth grade performs at the 30th percentile, so 70% of his peers are performing higher than he is on the assessment. And Joe continues to grow like a student, so he continues to change between assessments like a student at the 30th percentile, so behind the national average, then he's always going to remain below the benchmark. And so iReady has said, okay, well, let's take the information from the assessment and then let's find places where we can really guide instructional materials to help students grow and grow faster than their peers. And so this has been a discussion and assessment for a number of years now with this concept of necessary growth or adequate growth, meaning how much growth is necessary to get to the standard or to get above the standard. So the third assessment that we have as recommended is the MAST. And I know that's a brand new assessment. And, with brand new assessments, oftentimes there's some challenges in those first few years as well. And so, one of the reasons we included a couple of the comprehensive assessments within the comprehensive assessment program in Montana is that students are already taking those. And so you can kind of piggyback on that to get some of the information that you need in order to comply with the law and the evaluation without kind of ignoring the assessment that they're already taken. One of the other things that's really great about inclusion of a state assessment is oftentimes state assessments, the state provides some sort of public performance information. And so this gives the ability to compare performance of a choice school with a traditional public school. We'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses of MAST, or at least some of the ones that we saw from a more technical perspective on the next slide, along with the other ones. The ACT, kind of the same thing. It's part of the Montana's comprehensive assessment system. It's a measure of college readiness, post-secondary readiness in that sense. There is the ability to have to utilize a growth model with ACT if a student takes a pre-ACT assessment. in a grade before 11th grade when it's required for the state. So the conditional growth component is available. As we kind of move over to the next slide to talk about the strengths and limitations of the assessment, then we see that the NWEA map growth, again, strengths, we have a really large national norm sample. People really like the conditional growth model. It's pretty accurate in a sense and stable in a sense because of such a large sample. And they have really, really detailed technical documentation. So they release their technical documentation when the assessments change. They tend to communicate that very effectively. Those are some of the technical strengths. Some of the practical strengths is they have a lot of support available for people who choose the NWEA map growth assessments, which is really, really nice. And then they have very specific kind of proctoring detailed information around how to give the assessments. Some of the limitations for NWEA is, it's not directly aligned to Montana standards. It is more of like it's most comfortable in the norms-based bucket. So it's really making comparisons to students across the country. And there's limitations in the grades 9 through 12 growth model, which you see that's pretty common both in assessments like NWEA growth and iReady. Those assessments that aren't college readiness tend to have a harder time tracking growth in math and reading because of the way just kind of the diverse nature of courses and expectations for students in high school. It's not as clear as students in 3 through 8. So you kind of see that often. They're not bad, there's just some limitations. iReady diagnostics / inform, you get really skill focused diagnostics, the stretch growth goals, and then where we've seen a lot of people really, really like iReady is the instructional alignment tools that come with it. It just has the instructional tools with iReady are top notch. Some of the limitations are less public technical documentation, and there is an assessment for high school students, but there's no typical growth there. So, not necessarily one that we'd come out and specifically recommend. Now, if there's a school that comes in and proposes using iReady for high school, then I think that there's a vetting process that would take place with that checklist, and then they would have to come up with some information regarding growth in another way. Now, the MAST, some of the strengths that we saw in our research was, it's a state required assessment. So the strength there is that the kids are already taking it. It's directly aligned to Montana standards. There's strong reliability. In that equity and diff analysis, they have, which is very, very rare, specifically including Native American students, which we know is a large, especially compared to around the rest of the country, a large proportion of students in Montana. So that is a really interesting feature of the MAST. And I think one of the big strengths as you think about the kind of niche schools, problem solving schools that you may find as you field applications. Some of the limitations are it's a first year. This was the first year it rolled out statewide. There's a pilot, but the growth model's not yet available. We know that's coming, but it's not yet available. And there's no independent alignment study because it's very, very new as well. We did communicate with some people on the technical end of that and got the technical documentation for it. And we know that those things are likely coming. On the last recommendation, more on the high school end is the ACT and the pre-ACT. So, strengths is it's a college readiness measure. It's been around for a long time. They have conditional growth available. It's presupposing that a student takes a pre-ACT assessment before they take the ACT. And there's very, very detailed validity technical documentation. Limitations are it requires multiple administrations for growth, as does every assessment. But in this case, it requires, if you were to use this for growth, it would require an additional administration of a pre-ACT, which I don't think the state requires. And then it's not really aligned to state standards. It's more focused on measuring whether a student is ready for college level math, reading and writing. That might be a good spot if there's any questions about this stuff, to
Perfect.
kind of field those through Trish.
Okay, I have a question myself. I'm wondering,
Sure.
looking at the MAST, is it fairly common for each of the states to have their own assessment that's aligned with their standards?
Yes, yep, that is common. So, in Michigan, we have M-STEP, for example, that is aligned directly to the state standards here. And that is rather common across the country to have it aligned with the state standards. Yeah.
And then
yeah.
Are there any states assessments that are superior to others?
That's a good question. So, I mean, superior is a tough one they all have their challenges. So I think one of the challenges, so I read an article, actually Kathy had sent me an article earlier this week in preparation for this about MAST. And the MAST being a through-year assessment. So I believe they assess with the MAST, it's five times in a year. And one of the challenges with like a through-year assessment, and I'll connect this back to your question in a second,
Okay.
Trish. One of those challenges is that if a teacher or a classroom or a school falls behind in kind of the pace of their curriculum, the timing can be thrown off because those 3-year assessments are assessing specific things at a certain time. So there's some challenges there. And right now, that's probably a very significant challenge for MAST. But what I will say is that this concept of a through-year assessment has been something that's been rather desirable really in a lot of places across the country. And I haven't seen it, part of it's like, I don't know the context of every state, but part of it
Right.
is that I also realize that there's real challenges with the 3-year, because it is innovative, the 3-year assessment. And so part of how strong or weak something like the MAST becomes is going to be how the adaptations are made to the challenges like that. Now, I think the critiques of a lot of state assessments are very similar. It's, like in Michigan, for example, we see the M-STEP in Michigan tends to have a proficiency cut point that's much higher than the national average on an NWEA normed assessment. So, for example, we tend to see that students who meet the proficiency cut points in Michigan on the M-STEP, so kind of the base level proficiency on the state assessment, are typically scoring at like the 60 to 65th percentile on math and reading on the NWEA test. So there's oftentimes a lot of discussion about whether the state standards are too high or too low. Different states. So where I'd say, I think what you're looking for in a state assessment is, is there some adaptive nature of it to it? Do the standards make sense? That sort of thing. So it's hard for me to make a judgment call on like which state assessment is best. The through-year assessment, if that becomes, if a lot of that gets ironed out, then I think it will be innovative and probably likely to be a pretty good assessment. But I think that's going to shake out with time.
Right. Okay. I think when I was saying superior, I meant specifically like with validity and reliability.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Are some of them seeing better results?
It's all pretty similar to this,
Okay.
Trish, honestly. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Chip has a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was also about the mass test. Isn't it, or I know you said you got some of the technical data with it, but with the test being so new, it must be difficult to evaluate it. That's part one. Part two is with iReady, one of the things you said you liked was the fact that you could align instruction to improve growth, I guess would be the way to put it. Is there, do you know, is there anything like that with the MAST, or how does it compare is what I'm trying to ask you.
Sure. I already am a lot more familiar with those, with that alignment and the ability for that to be aligned. State assessments, it's not often that there's like within the same school year the support for the assessment because of its kind of summative nature, meaning that you're taking this throughout the course of the year, but it's really in order to figure out whether a student is meeting the standard or not. So I would not expect that to be the case, that there's as many instructional alignment tools. And I think this really harkens back to the purpose of including something like MAST or the ACT is really, an argument for, some simplicity there, in that the students are taking it. They already are taking it because of the federal requirement for testing. So the state selects the test and the students have to take it. And so that's really the inclusion of MAST, not so much the tools associated with it. As far as how is it to evaluate, it certainly is more difficult to evaluate a brand new assessment because there's just not the track record of results to evaluate it against. But what we can see is some of the technical documentation. And that's really why the strengths here reflect some of those technical documentation components, is because in a lot of ways that's the bulk of what we have.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Good questions.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Joe, I would just add, I think it's in your report, but one of the interesting things that we had talked about and is noted in the report is that a school may choose to use a combination of these assessments as well. So, potentially MAP for their, I think they have a strong program in like, K to 8, but then 9 to 12, you'd be looking at potentially the ACT. You could also do, some iReady with MAST, or, there's ability to kind of combine some of these assessments too, which, we don't want to over-test, but the idea is that, schools are using that data to inform instruction. And I would say the other piece that we talked about is, the law does allow schools to pick any assessment they like, right? So, and Joe and Bill have provided, a matrix for how the commission can judge those, but, depending on the commission's comfort level, like say a school is designing an assessment specifically to meet their model, it's not been tried or tested. We don't have any valid or reliable measures for that yet. They could be administering one of these assessments side by side so that at least while they're testing that assessment, we would have a valid and reliable measure to look at as we vet out, what could be a new and innovative assessment.
Certainly. Thanks, Kathy. That kind of flows right into what this next slide highlights too. Because, kind of the transition I want to make between the last slide and this slide is I think that the last slide kind of reflects, or it could come off as like a box that we're trying to fit the schools into, or when really the law seems to be after a lot of flexibility. And that's the innovative part of the law here too, is this flexibility that exists for schools. So it really helps to preserve some school autonomy while ensuring quality oversight. And so like Kathy mentioned, it would be commonplace to, we see it in Michigan. We see it in even in the traditional side of using one or multiple assessments for performance evaluations. So schools could certainly combine recommended assessments to cover proficiency, growth, post-secondary readiness requirements. You may have a management company that comes to you to apply to open a choice school, and they might even have their own kind of in-house assessment platform that they've built, and they want to use that for their proficiency or for their growth or for their post-secondary readiness. And you can go through the process, the practical checklist to make sure that it complies with the, validity and reliability components, and then, look at some of the other important components as well. But there's certainly flexibility there for schools to use one or multiple assessments or to propose alternative assessments. So you'll notice in the report that we didn't just provide like practical checklists, like completed practical checklists for just those 4 assessments. We provided them for 2 other additional assessments as well. One being the SAT and PSAT. That was, we don't know, maybe you end up with a management company that's more comfortable with that, and they like the PSAT and the SAT connection, so maybe they propose that. Well, we provided a completed checklist for that. And then as an example of a more kind of niche focused assessment, we also provided a completed checklist for the ACT Work Keys assessment, which really focuses on job force readiness and buckets and classifies students into categories for the different job types that they may have the skills for at this point. So there's definitely room for schools to propose alternative assessments, and that's really why we wanted to keep the focus on okay, there's these 4 that we can recommend as kind of a baseline, and we can provide the documentation for those recommendations. But I think the kind of larger discussion and the more exciting piece is the piece where it's okay, here are the tools in order to evaluate an assessment to make sure that the school can communicate what they're getting out of the assessment, and that the commission can ensure that the assessment complies with the statutory requirements. And that's what I mean when I say meet statutory requirements, and then the evaluation tools for the commission. A practical checklist, a decision matrix. Those can be used to help evaluate any other proposed assessment against those criteria.
Joe, if I could just pause there, I believe
Sure.
Katie Franklin has a question, and I think there she is.
Yep. Thanks. It's a question / statement. So
Sure.
I think that as part of this, especially when we're looking at our high school or our high schools, that it is not just the psychometric properties of these assessments, but also in Montana, high school assessments also qualify high school students for very certain scholarships. Like the PSAT makes them, taking that and the assessment scores of that makes the Presidential Scholarship and the National Merit Scholarship available. And so I think that information is just important for the commission to be aware of, that the assessment tools, they're not only important in terms of assessment, but also for access for Montana students, and making sure that the charter schools the choice schools are aware of that too.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dr. Sullivan.
Okay, we have another
Dr.
question
Franklin. Yes.
from Barbara.
Hi, thanks. I apologize. I'm having technical difficulties, so I'm on my phone right now. I just wanted to make a from the field, the MAST assessment. I hear the qualities that you found, but in the field, we do not find it useful. We do not find it to drive instruction, and I would challenge anyone to find a teacher that's actually using it, or a building that can actually use that data to drive instruction. The reporting is terrible, and the kids don't take it seriously. And as a state, I think we were less than 5% proficient. So I just want to put a caution there that in the field, we are not finding any of that success or any of the things that you had mentioned as being positives for the mask. So I just want to put that out on the table that in the field, we find that to be a very invaluable assessment for driving students learning.
Thank you, Barbara. And just to let you know, Kathy and I sort of insisted they include it in this presentation because it is our current state assessment. So only really for that reason. But I think going forward, presuming we have access to the law and this comes into being, if the state switches back to, Smarter Balance, or if they choose some other thing or something, we would likely be sure to include whatever it is the state is using on a recommendation list for applicants. But I hear you. Thank you so much. McCall, I'm wondering if you wanted to chime in at all.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really don't have anything to add. I mean,
Okay.
I think that the Board of Public Ed is still trying to gather information from the field, and obviously the board is the one that sets statewide assessment. The board has set the ACT. It's been longstanding for our high school students. I don't think there's any question that one will change. I think there's been a lot of questions of what we'll be using for elementary, and I think that is still a question of where we're going to go with that. So I think I'm just going to leave it at that.
Excellent. Well, that's what partnerships are for. Thank you. Okay, Joe.
Okay, thank you for those questions and observations. So now when we look at the assessment evaluation framework, so this is kind of the practical checklist, falls into these really 7 buckets. Well, a few less because I broke up validity here in a little, but this is kind of a track that it follows is, kind of from top to bottom, we see, does it have face validity and practical significance? So does the assessment clearly state what it measures and align to the evaluator needs? A lot of times that face validity and practical significance, that might be an argument that a choice school makes for a proposed assessment is that they're serving a niche community in this assessment, kind of connects with that niche community and has that face validity. The content validity and the standards alignment. So is the content aligned to Montana standards or relevant academic standards for that particular choice school? Does the assessment provide evidence of validity? So does the vendor provide things like correlations, item analyses, subject matter expert reviews, and fairness evidence? So fairness evidence, including like the diff process in number 6, is often included in the evidence of validity. But in the last recent couple of decades, equity and fairness, the diff piece, the differential item functioning, tends to get its own spot in technical documentation, and so it's labeled at number 6 here. Is there evidence of reliability? So are the reliability coefficients high? In academic work, we tend to think about that as greater than or equal to 0.8 for a reliability coefficient. But you do see some deviation from that 0.8, just kind of when you take things from theory to practice. And do they have well-documented standard error measures and subgroup data? Growth measure quality. Is there a clearly specified longitudinal growth model supporting conditional interpretation? And then we get into the equity and fairness piece. Does the vendor conduct routine equity analysis using diff and revise items when bias is found? And then accessibility. Are accessibility features and accommodations documented, compliant, and monitored? When you go through the policy or the actual assessment checklist, the practical checklist, and you even see some of the examples that we provided, not every single box is going to be checked. And I think it's, the checklist really provides a really detailed set of assurances for an assessment. Not every one of those needs to be checked for an assessment to comply with the statute. But we wanted to give a very comprehensive way to assess an evaluation, and that's also why we went to kind of the decision matrix route, where we have some questions, the ability to highlight some strengths and weaknesses as an assessment is proposed and discussed. But I think the law provides a very, very flexible framework and an innovative framework for schools to be able to propose the assessments by which they're evaluated. And that, I think, is a great transition into some of the considerations and implications. So I know there's been even in that there's been some discussion in our work group over the past few months around who proposes the framework. And I know it sounds like some of you have had discussions about that. And so, I thought it was important we thought it was important to include it in this presentation, where the commission is establishing the overarching performance framework, and choice schools are proposing specific interim measures and assessments they will use to demonstrate progress toward the framework's goals. And so this collaborative process, it takes place during the contracting phase. And then as far as how do we use the data and how do annual targets get set, the choice schools collect the baseline data from fall testing in their first year of operations, and then the commission and school then collaboratively set annual performance targets, leading to those goals in the performance framework by the time of renewal. Does that kind of flow with your discussions, Kathy?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can elaborate, Kathy, but I was going to say, I mean, this is just earlier in our meeting, we approved to seek legal counsel on a lot of our policies. And this is a perfect example of one that will be looked at. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, well, I think it's great. This allows for us, we have our standards in the performance framework, but this allows for us to work with schools over the term of their contract to set interim goals or annual goals to meet those performance targets. And I think that's really important because, oftentimes families choose choice schools or charter schools because their child isn't, performing to their expectations or to, where they think they should be. And so kids may come in very low, and, that initial baseline data may be very low for schools, but, the role of the choice school is to close those gaps over time. And so the growth measure from year to year is really the most important measure for choice schools, is that, are we doing something for this child that they weren't getting in the setting that they were before? And I really like this part. I think it's going to be a challenge to manage individual goals for each school, especially as we grow and grow and grow. But I think it's a really great feature of the law.
Great. And I think that one of the kind of advantages to this, and we haven't seen this, and it's been really exciting to be on this side of it too, is because I think that as you kind of digest and seek legal counsel for this type of thing, it gives you the ability to really implement it in a high quality way as schools apply, instead of like trying to apply this new kind of nuance and flexibility to a sector or a portfolio of schools of, dozens or maybe even hundreds of schools. I think it would be really difficult to make that adjustment after processes have been built. But I think to know the answer to these questions before you build the processes is going to make, I'm excited for where that takes you all, because it's very, very innovative. Some of the other considerations and implications. So, we're at our core data and assessment and reporting nerds. And so when we were reading the law, some of these things jumped out at us. So, annual reports for all schools. This actually gives the commission the ability, so the commission may rely on school submitted data in 4B. That's one of the so I'll go ahead and read 4B. So each authorizer shall annually publish and provide, as part of its annual report to the commission, a performance report for each school it oversees within the performance framework set forth in the charter contract and 20-11-112. The authorizer may require each choice school it oversees to submit an annual report to assist the authorizer in gathering complete information about each school consistent with the performance framework. So that's one consideration. And then I'll kind of address that consideration further on in the slide. The second consideration is the June 30th reporting deadline in the renewal year. And that's specifically focused on 5B, where it says no later than June 30th of each year, the authorizer shall issue a choice school performance report and charter renewal application guide to any choice school whose charter contract will expire the following year. The performance report must summarize the choice school's performance record to date based on the data required by this part in the charter contract, and must provide notice of any weaknesses or concerns perceived by the authorizer concerning the choice school that may jeopardize renewal if not promptly rectified. The choice school shall respond to the performance report and submit any corrections or clarifications within 90 days. So, kind of two reporting considerations. The implications there, I just want to highlight would be, there's a tight timeline between testing and that June 30th deadline. So to include the current year information, that's a tight timeline. Spring assessments often extend into late May or even mid-June in some circumstances. And so some solutions to that or some things to consider might be that the commission use prior year data or adopt a two-stage reporting process where you release that and then you release the information as things come out. We've seen that that's a common practice. And I know even, to some of the challenges associated with the MAST as well is that I believe the data from this last year on MAST came out in November, I believe. So, significant lag time. And so, those are things to consider as you're building processes around the reporting side and expectations around around the reporting side. But also kind of over all of that is a little bit of a question, or maybe it's not a little question, but a big question of data ownership and access. So in our experience, we see that schools often own the assessment data, in that maybe an authorizer would come through with a data sharing agreement or an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, built into the charter contract to ensure timely commission access to those data. Some of that, is a decision that has to be made on the commission's behalf or on the commission's part to on whether or not you're going to have ownership or have those data sharing agreements and MOUs. But we also wanted to point out if you don't have, it's always nice to have multiple reference points, especially for the validation of information used for even like high stakes decisions like a charter renewal. And so to rely purely on the school to submit their performance information puts things in a place where the school's providing the actual data and the results that are going to be used to evaluate it. Whereas if there was a data sharing agreement, then it would allow you all to use raw data to verify the information the school's also producing, and the school can then verify the information that you're producing. And so there's a nice back and forth that exists in that environment when both parties can kind of check and verify for each other. So that's part of the next step to the next steps that we'd recommend as well. So, to decide on some of that data ownership and control. And this relates back to, I said we would come back to those required provisions from that subsection 1 in the law, where there's attendance, recurrent enrollment from year to year being the two big ones associated with. So that's individual student attendance data, or I suppose it could be statewide kind of chronic absenteeism, but there has to be an attendance component. It'd be tough to do an attendance component without any agreement about how to access that data or verify the accuracy of that data. from a school, and also the recurrent enrollment from year to year. So you'd have to know likely the student's enrollment date at the school. And so I think those are important considerations just as you build out processes and really field applications and that sort of thing. The second piece there is, establishing verification and administration processes. So, creating processes for accuracy verification of school submitted analyses, defining expectations for things like participation rates on an assessment, and just the way assessments are proctored and administered at a school are good things to consider at this point. And then maybe even, consideration of periodic audits or validation checks for school produced reports. Those are kind of some common practices that we see. And then the seeking legal clarification, it sounds like that's where you're headed is, there's this component of subsection 2, which says that each choice school in conjunction with its authorizers shall set annual performance targets designed to help each school meet applicable federal, state, and authorizer expectations. And that 3A component where it actually says that the contract performance framework must include rigorous, valid, and reliable indicators proposed by a choice school to evaluate its performance that are consistent with the purposes of this part. There's maybe a little bit of gray area that could, legal clarification could help. So to kind of summarize where we've gone in this work is, 4 assessments recommended for approval: NWEA MAP, the iReady diagnostic/inform, MAST, and ACT pre-ACT. We've created a practical checklist that you all can work through when somebody proposes a different assessment, as well as a decision matrix to help assess those checklists. The schools retain the flexibility to propose assessments, and the commission ensures that they're compliant. Some key next steps around data ownership decisions, data sharing agreement, development or MOU development, some legal clarifications. Overall, the assessment system has to support valid, reliable measures of proficiency, growth, and then subgroup equity. I'd love to take any more questions and discussion.
I am just scrolling through the
Sure. I hit stop share so I could see you all, if that's okay.
Perfect. Yes, that is excellent.
Okay.
Thank you. So just to let the commission know kind of what Kathy and I have been talking about in the executive committee is that these recommendations that are being presented to us today, we want each member to have time to really go back and review the report that Solomon provided for us today, now that we've had this presentation, and that in April, when we meet again, one of the agenda items will be the discussion about the various recommendations that Solomon has made and whether or not we should go forward with those. So we're not making any decisions today. We're just kind of presenting it so that we have time to think about it. As far as questions to your presentation, I had one, and this is kind of specifically in consideration of the challenges with measuring proficiency and growth at a high school level and making sure that we are compliant with what's in the law. I mean, do you guys suggest that there should maybe be some clarification put into the law for the reality that this is a difficult thing to do? Or do you think just kind of doing our best like we are right here and like the state does? I mean, because they give the ACT also, you know what I mean? Like that's probably sufficient.
So clarification's always better. So if there's the potential for that to be clarified, I think that's good. I also think so, like, as far as like valid and reliable growth, so it's technical, but it's also a big kind of term. And so, or a broad term in a sense, because growth can be a number of different things. I think that, it would be harder. I think it's harder to make the argument for validity and reliability if it's a very kind of bespoke assessment that's proposed by a school for that 9 through 12 segment. I think that's harder to make an argument than it is to make the argument that we're going to use pre-ACT to ACT or PSAT to SAT, or even like change up or down the scale on ACT work keys. I think so I think it's, you know, a matter of good faith effort in that sense too, would probably be how I would interpret that. But again, I think the clarification is probably a good thing to seek in that sense. Yeah, so the high school growth is the high school growth metric. We went through a process back in my previous role, and we worked for the Center of Assessment and Innovation, which I believe, from looking at the MAST documentation, is also who is involved in MAST to some level as well. And there's this concept around growth. So one of the people there has been instrumental in just growth development and research across the country. Dr. Betta Benner is his name. And there's this concept of like growth to nowhere, which is pretty common discussion point in high school, because by the time a student gets to the growth component, is you would like to see eventually that students are growing to a point where they're meeting expectations, whatever that is, whether it's the state standards, whether it's the standards within the school. And so it creates, I mean, there's a hard stop in high school, right? It's only 4 years, it's 12th grade and things are done. And so growth in high school is just a difficult conversation, even nationally, about what growth in high school means, what's enough growth in high school, that sort of thing. So for that to be a part of this discussion is not surprising in a sense, because it's difficult. Bill, would you like to add anything else there?
Yeah, the one thing I would focus on a little bit from just a real practical standpoint is, Joe alluded to this, when we think about high school measures like SATs, college and career readiness, or ACTs kind of equivalent, those are set proficiency standards of where we want all of our high schoolers to get to, right? When we think about growth, we've talked about higher achievers and lower achievers. We talked a lot about this with Kathy and Trish as we work through this process. A lot of times when we're talking about growth, we're really focused on our students who are not quite up to that level yet. And we have a lot of them, right? And so I think that's where all the things that Joe's mentioned about like pre-SAT or the PSAT to SAT ladder is really useful, because you find out where students who are not quite at that level yet, where they could get some help and move up. So if I were, what I really think about growth in high school is I'm thinking about students who are not yet on that proficiency track. How do we get them there? And that's what I want to see in assessments. Do you give me information that I can help that student get to that point? In Michigan, we're on the PSAT track. We have PSAT 8 all the way through the SAT every year. And that's a state requirement. And so schools, we use that information to try and help those students. That's what I would maybe focus on that. I don't know from a clarity standpoint on the legal part. That's Joe's, really the expert here between the two of us on that. I'm just the guy who's like, I want to see that info.
And yeah, Madam Chair, I will add that Bill and Joe provided us some metrics in the performance framework for both growth and proficiency, and did note in there for students who are below the below expectations, they would have a different growth target than those that have already achieved the target. And I will also add, as we actually get into this stuff, we may want to reach back out to Joe and Bill as experts in this, because it is kind of hard to track that growth piece, I think. But
I was thinking that too. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Does
and I think
else?
too,
Go ahead.
okay.
Joe.
So I wanted to, because I didn't want Member Forrester Frank to feel like I sidestepped her comments about the mass too, because I do think that that's very important as well. And we do see that that is a very common even frustration for state assessments in general, is that there's very, very few state assessments that we've come across that provide relevant information for like classroom instruction, especially within that year. And so I just wanted to recognize that member Forrester Frank brought that up, and that is that we wouldn't consider that a strength of the MAST for sure. And we don't see that as a strength of a lot of state assessments. The inclusion of something like MAST and ACT or pre-ACT is really more about a decision to not exclude it than it is a decision to include it as the definitive performance framework, because students are already taking the assessment.
Right. Perfect. Does anyone else have any questions? How about any attendees or from the public?
Madam Chair, I do actually see Chip's hand up before you move to the public.
Hey, Chip, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry about that. It sounds like what you're saying in high school to measure growth, there aren't that many options other than pre-SAT, SAT, and pre-ACT and ACT. Is that a fair statement or not?
So that's a great observation. And I think it's also dependent on the type of school too. So in like the niche that the school's serving. So there's the ACT Work Keys assessment that really focuses on, like workforce readiness component. And so there's that as well. Even assessments like NWEA has a 9 through 12 component. So there is an achievement and growth component. And I think that it's still worthy of the argument that it's valid and reliable. They have the model component. It's just high school growth by its very nature is difficult to measure, partially because students choose very differentiated tracks once they get to high school too. You know what I mean? So there's like, you might have students taking advanced calculus or AP calculus, and also students taking, pre-algebra. And so there's there's a wide variance, and it makes it a lot more difficult than the kind of bread and butter 3 through 8 kind of track forward. And you see it reflected in really the standards associated with assessments as well. So they're out there, member Linden Lob. We provided some technical documentation, and included in that technical documentation for like NWEA is discussions about that. I think for me, if I were evaluating an application, I would be evaluating, or I would really be kind of honed in on what the connection between what the choice school is trying to do for their students and what the assessment is measuring for those students as kind of the North Star for how to select a high school assessment. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. Thank you.
Okay. Good question.
Looks like we have an attendee who has a question. Todd Hansen.
Cool.
Welcome. Hi, Todd. You can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I just had a quick question. A great conversation today. Appreciate the opportunity to sit in and to listen to the presentation. My question is there any flexibility or latitude in the application of what you're talking about today for a potential program of study that is K-8 versus K-12 and does not lead to termination in a K-8 diploma, but is structured around more closely to what are the state statutory requirements as to age limits upon which you no longer have to attend a public school? You could go into a particular internship or training program after the age of 16 that is not actually part of a recognized high school program or diploma granting process, but instead you're moving students through 8th grade content and then transitioning them into other work-based or fields of study or apprenticeships or internships. Is the work that's being done by the commission and what we heard today in the analysis that was provided, is there flexibility in that being applicable to what others might be envisioning?
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. That is an excellent question. So I think first, I hope I get all the parts of this. So Kathy, feel free to chime in, and Chip too, because you know the law, but anyone can, you know, to add to this. But the first part is that we presume that in the application process, when governing boards are coming to us, they're going to be requesting what they want for their school. There's so much flexibility in the law that if you wanted to have a K-3 school and that's it, that's what you're offering, that would be the application. You might be a K-5 school, or you might be a 3-8 school, or you might be a K-12, or just a 6-12 or 9-12. I mean, we're presuming we're going to see a mixed bag there, and we will have to consider each application as it comes in as the proposal is specifying. And the idea is, because there is so much flexibility in the law, that as long as the commission is compliant with what's in the law, the policies could always expand or contract as necessary in order to better clarify if we come into some kind of conflict with a particular application or something. But and everything would be done in public meeting, in deliberating and voting for the commission, just like we brought up earlier. Like, what if there's a hearing and we have to close the school? You know, like, that's going to be done in the public eye and people will be able to participate. So to answer your question kind of about that flexibility of high school, like, if an application comes in that's for, like, you know, like you said, in compliance with compulsory attendance laws, and there's a high school that's only going through age 16, we would have to take that into consideration, because maybe it's not going to result in a diploma, or perhaps it is going to result in a diploma that's happening at an accelerated rate. So each application would be evaluated individually on its merits. Does anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would add to that. And Mr. Hanson, thank you for the question. That statute does allow for the governing board of the choice school to set their graduation requirements.
Great. Great to hear that that flexibility is not only in statute, but is part of the scope of analysis that is being contemplated by the commission when in anticipation of the kinds of applications that you're likely going to get. School districts and related communities who have found themselves on the outside of the other mechanism that exists, I think are acutely interested in what's going on with this commission and the opportunities that it may present for alternative approaches.
Thank you so much. I mean, that is, again, going back to our core values that we approved last time and that we have published on the Board of Public Education, that intentionally diverse really is our value. We want to make sure that we are creating policies and that will help regulate this so that it doesn't go off the rails, but at the same time offers communities something very specific to them that is different. And ideally, this would be a pathway for them. Okay, anyone else? Okay, you guys, well, thank you so much. Joe and Bill, do you guys have any kind of closing remarks that you'd like to make for us?
Just thank you for the opportunity to work together. It's been very collaborative and productive, and thank you for the opportunity to come and present to you today. Email, call, let us know what you need.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, take care. Thank you. Okay, team. So looking at the agenda, we had a break scheduled at 10:45, but since it's 10:28, I think we should take our break right now and reconvene at 10:45. Does anyone have any concerns with that or something they want to comment about it? We good? Okay, everyone have a nice coffee break. See you at 10:45. Thanks. Okay, it looks like everyone is back. Great. Okay, let's reconvene. All right. So we are moving on to item 5, which are our various reports. So the first one is chairperson report. Okay. So I am glad to report that as chair of such a competent and willing team, most of the activity this past quarter has been delegated to the Director of Planning and the subcommittees. So thank you all so much for what you've done. The Standing Executive Committee has been particularly active by integrating bi-monthly meetings, one with the Director of Planning and the other with the Executive Director of the Board of Public Education. And additionally, the Executive Committee has begun group trainings with Jim Gunner of the National Charter School Institute, focused on best practices of board governance. And these coaching sessions will continue through the end of the commission's contract with the Institute, which is in June of 26. That's it. Are there any questions? How about from attendees? No? Okay, we're good. Let's move on. Chip, treasurer's report.
Madam Chair, if you go to page 162 in your agenda packet, you can see our budget from July 1st, 2023 through February 8th of 2026. We had a couple of grants and that's where the majority of the money came from, $327,500. And if you look at the expenses here, it's we start with paying our wonderful director, other services. I just want to point out there, the biggest chunk of that, it's kind of odd to have it classified as other, but I guess that's the way it is legal fees. So that's been the bulk of that. And then you can see the rest of it, communications, travel, excuse me, the travel courses for our director to attend some of the conferences and also the rest of us. And that, as of February 8th, left us with about $75,000. Now we've allocated most of that for next year. We have another $200,000 grant coming from Bradley in March. Is that correct, Chair Schreiber?
I think it's coming this week, actually.
Okay, great. And of that, we've planned to continue to pay our director, the good news, and obviously we've, as you heard already, allocated a big part of that as a retainer for, we know what will be required legal fees. And we're paying Epicenter for the platform to track applications, and also more of the same conference fees, travel, and more consultants. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question, Chip. Do you know what the rent is?
The rent is for the Reader Center. When we had the
for the conferences.
Conferences at the Reader Center, yes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay, let's move on. Let's go to the Policymaking Special Committee report.
Okay, Madam Chairman, the Policy Committee, you can see the fruits of our meeting by the different policies that we approved today: renewal, early indicators of distress, and corrective action, and school closure. We always discuss, we have hour-long meetings, we discuss these policies and track through them and try to present to the board as a whole a solid policy for approval, knowing that we don't know what we don't know yet, and when the time comes, we'll probably add it. So that's been what we've been up to the last quarter.
Great. Well, I'm impressed with what you guys delivered today. I mean, that was an enormous amount of policy and a huge amount of work. And those documents were clean. I mean, we really had very few suggestions for improving them. So thank you guys so much for your close attention to the details of everything. It saves us all time.
Especially Kathy.
Especially Kathy. Thank you so much.
It's all teamwork. Thank you all.
Okay, and fundraising special committee report.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Taylor.
Hi. So as Trish said, we should be getting the grant this week. We had met and updated some language on our website in regards to accepting donations and that kind of thing. And yeah, that is what we've been up to. There any questions or did I miss anything, Kathy or Trish?
I need a reminder. So I'm like, I know I'm on this subcommittee, but did we discuss like doing a campaign or something going forward, a fundraising campaign, or like, is that on our next meeting? We have that on our agenda for next time.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So yeah, we're just trying to decide to evaluate whether or not we want to actively start fundraising, and if so, what for. Okay. Right. Thank you, Taylor.
Yes, thank you.
And Stockton. Great. Okay, that leads us to Special Education Consideration Committee. Barbara?
All right. The SPED Consideration Subcommittee met to determine the best path to ensure the community schools' implementation of special education programs to ensure they're compliant with federal IDEA requirements and offer high-quality learning experiences for students. A request for proposals was launched in November to provide guidance to the commission and potential school founders in the development of compliant and quality special education programs. But unfortunately, that budget that the commission had allocated for this project was underestimated. The committee is currently regrouping to determine how to accomplish the deliverables outlined in the RFP with existing resources available to the commission, considering local resources available. The committee is working on a plan that involves customizing resources for the community choice schools, identifying where legal review is needed to determine Title 20 non-exemptions, and how it all impacts SPED programming. And finally, if training for the commission and administrative services for policy development from consultants may be necessary.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Barbara? Okay, I just want to add to that, as being on this committee too, that I just want to point out to everyone, we are so lucky to have Barbara on the commission. She's an amazing asset and she really shines on this subcommittee. And I look forward to, getting all of our policy up and running in this coming year for special education consideration. I just feel really good about it. So I applaud you, Barbara. Thank you very much for what you have to offer.
Thank you. I appreciate your kind words. That means a lot from you. Thank you.
Great. Okay, Kathy, that's you, Director of Planning Report.
My turn. Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could direct you all to page 13 in the packet. I just want to run through, and I think this gives us a good visual. So I'll give you a second to get there.
Yeah, give me a sec.
Yeah.
So the PDF page 13.
PDF page 13 in the board packet. Yes. So just give me a heads up when you're there.
All right. I'm there, and I'm assuming I'm the slowest. You guys good to go? Give me some nods. Okay, looks like we're good.
Right.
Okay,
great.
Go ahead.
Good. So what I did is just kind of put together a visual of the whole charter cycle for community choice schools, and everything from application to renewal to closure. And I thought I'd just kind of run through that because, especially with some of the pieces that we talked about today with intervention and corrective action and really how that flows with the contracting cycle. So if you start there at the top, you see in the gold pre-application planning. So this is the work that's done prior to any potential founder submitting their application. They submit the application, the commission determines.
Kathy, I'm sorry, can I
Yes.
just interrupt you for a second? Is there a way that you could you share your screen? Do you have this file up? I think it would be helpful for our participants if they could see
Great
the
idea.
slide that you're talking about. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let me
It's
just
so
get to that page. Okay, and now share my screen. All right, can you see the chart, the flow chart?
Yep, there it is.
Yes, okay,
You could
great.
maybe blow it up a little bit.
Blow it up. That I can do. Can I do that? Where do I do that?
Just a
Let me
tad.
get this, move over here.
Great.
How's that? Is it
That
all on
works.
there?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Yep. Yeah, so we were at the proposed application cycle. So the founder comes to the commission, proposes the school model, either approved or denied. And you can see the arrows going there, or the flow going there. If approved, they move into charter contracting. So as Joe and Bill described, this is a piece where we're working with the commission to set out some unique goals for the school, but also working within the performance framework and the existing contract that's laid out. Once that contracting is done, the school moves into their year zero, which is the next piece that we're developing in the 2026 Bradley Grant. And that basically is just helping a school get everything together to successfully open. And that is a year-long process. And, you know, within that year, you kind of see off ramp and back to potential applications. So if a school runs into just a challenge that can't be overcome, such as a facility where you think you have it together and at the last minute something falls apart, you can't get your facility, or potentially enrollment isn't where it needs to be to support your budget, just different things like that, you know, really one-off scenarios that hopefully this year zero program planning, you know, is robust enough to support all schools and make sure that they're getting through that. But if something happens, there's a potential for schools to off ramp there and go back to the application phase then the next year. So providing a successful year zero opening, you go into operations and oversight. So this is years 1 through 5 of the contract cycle, where the school is just up and running and operating as a school does. But now you see there the arrow over and back to indicators of distress. So enrollment starts to drop and we're seeing issues with the budget or something like that. And this is a time then when the director and the school leaders and governing board would get together and say, hey, let's get a plan together to correct this. Now, hopefully that plan comes together, everything goes great, they move back into regular operations and oversight. In the instance it doesn't, the school would move into formal corrective action. And that was one of the policies that we approved today, with the different levels of corrective action, depending on the severity of the concern with the school. So hopefully the corrective action comes through, the school is able to correct it, they move back into normal operations and oversight. And again, as long as things are going well, they're just, you know, going through their regular operations until they come to charter renewal. If corrective action doesn't go well, there's a potential for revocation of the contract before the 5 years are up. So that's where you see the arrows going either way. Operations and oversight is, like I said, just the regular operations of the school. You see that renewal process. So that launches at the end of year 4 and the renewal takes place throughout the fall of year 5 with a decision made by, I think we have it made by December, January-ish in the policy, so that mid-year of the 5th year of contracting, the school knows we're either great to go back up to establish a contract for the next 5 years or potentially move into closure. And that would launch that closure protocol and making sure that everything is wrapped up and the school make sure all the kids have another school to go to. Teachers are, you know, supported in finding another job. And that's kind of why that happens about January of that 5th year, is so that people have time to plan for the upcoming year if the closure does occur. So that's the cycle of the charter contract. Now we have everything together, at least in draft form and approved of all of these processes, which is an amazing accomplishment. So thank you to everyone who has helped with that. The Institute's been a great help. Our policy subcommittee, Trish, obviously, we go through this quite a bit and help scrub things up. So I'm very appreciative of that. I do want to note that as we've gone through this process and like getting some of the policies together, we've noticed some things in the charter contract that need to be revised. We've noticed some pieces of the framework that we approved. So we approved these like, gosh, probably in one of our very first meetings about 2 years ago. So Allison and I have gone back and made some recommendations for updates to that. And Trish is currently reviewing some of that, and we'll get a little bit more here, all prior to our April meeting, where we will take a look at revisions to all of those documents. But I think we're in great shape. Other than having the year zero, we would be ready to launch an application cycle, but it'd be nice to, kind of have time to build that whole year zero prior to launch, or not in coordination with launching it. But we would never deny an opportunity to open a cycle right now, which would be amazing. So.
Right. Thank
Any
you,
questions? About that process before I finish my report?
Yeah, I was just wanted to point out that to everyone to clarify that the year zero pre-opening, this is not in law. Each school will not be required to do this. Like, for example, if a charter management organization comes in and they're like, we've opened hundreds of charter schools, like we've got our own pre-opening thing, or actually we're ready to go, like starting in August, like we've already done all this. They can skip that and go in. It's not required. Rather, it's additive in a way to support the mom and pop schools that we hope to see that are probably more likely to show up in Montana initially. And it's a way to ensure that they can uphold everything that is in that charter contract, and that they have the support of the commission as their authorizer to do the absolute best job that they can. And then I also want to point out that after the renewal determination year 5, and they cycle back, if they get approved to continue as a public school, then they go back to the charter contract, and the Community Choice Schools Act allows the authorizer to extend that contract. It doesn't have to be for 5 years. Depending on how well that school is doing and how the authorizer is feeling about it, we could make it a 10-year contract, or we could make it a 15-year contract, whatever. Like, it's up to the authorizer based on their best practices. So there's some choice worked into that as well. And for school, since they're having to turn in the annual report anyway as part of operating, like, the commission's going to know, the authorizers are going to know how these schools are doing, but it really is like a reward for them not to have to do a renewal cycle, because that takes away from really caring for the school and the students and what's going on there, because they have to be focused on this whole renewal process. So anyway, I just think that you kind of look at this chart, and at first your brain is like, oh my gosh, what is this? But then it just falls into place and it makes sense. And it's an incredible amount of work that you've done, Kathy. So thank you again so much.
Well, you're
Does
welcome.
anyone else have questions about this cycle? Okay, you can go on, Kathy. Do you have more?
All right, I will stop sharing. Great, yeah, so then I just wanted to update a bit. So at the BPE's January meeting, I did present our annual report template. So this is the Commission's annual report to the BPE, to the Education Interim Committee, and to the public. There were some little bits of feedback in that, some appreciation for the clarity in reporting on the school level data. There were some questions about data privacy and following OPI regulations to ensure that we're not getting down to the student level to identify an individual student when we're reporting out data. And then one of the members did suggest that NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, could potentially be used as an apples to apples comparison if the commission or any of the choice schools are selected for NAEP in the future. So I thought that was interesting. That was something I hadn't thought of yet. I will also be presenting that template and then just a bit of an update to the Education Interim Committee and Interim Funding Committee next month. So we're giving us time in their agenda, which we're very grateful for. Yeah, then I just want to update a couple public relations pieces. So I was invited last month to Idaho with the National Charter Schools Institute. Jim Gunner and Allison Murphy were there meeting with Bloom and the Idaho Commission Director. So unfortunately, the weather did not cooperate and I didn't make it to Idaho. So I missed some school visits and a legislative dinner, which they had invited me to. But I was able to, thank goodness for technology, get on Zoom with Idaho Commission's Director and also with the Executive Director of the Bloom Foundation. And both of those conversations were just incredibly enlightening. Being able to just, talk with another director who has a law very similar to ours. She's also new to the role, although their commission has been up for a while. So I always want to know, what are you working on and what are you working to improve? Because we have an opportunity right now to integrate all of those pieces in. And as we were kind of solving through the special education policy piece, it was interesting to get the perspective of the commission and the perspective of Bloom on how they're handling special education support for schools. So, and just as a side, Bloom is a nonprofit in Idaho that was built to support their charter network. So they have an incredible funder, and they also are the entity that disperses the charter school program grant, so the federal grant. Yeah, just having a conversation with both of those and seeing their different models, and I shared findings with the executive committee, but different approaches to support to schools. But I think, as the commission is looking to grow, and especially with the challenges with our funding model, getting a fundraising plan in place is incredibly important. And what Bloom shared was the most successful move that they made was to find a philanthropy partner who shared their values and their mission. And I think, the work that the commission has done to define our values and our mission is step one in that process. So I think that's great. And as the fundraising committee gets together, we'll work to share that mission out to hopefully bring in some philanthropy to schools and help be able to support them. They had also mentioned the pieces that funders like about their model is that they have very strong financial oversight of their schools. And they have a highly respected, regarded individual who oversees that, their CEO. And they also have what they call a fellowship program, which I think is very similar to our Year Zero program, where they're, kind of mentoring and nourishing the school leader as they move into startups. So good points for us to consider as we are looking to build out the fundraising plan in the future. The other piece I want to mention is, we put that NACSA membership into place, and I'm definitely taking advantage of it. They have launched a few more communities of practice. So I think I have a meeting with them every month now, and they're great. They've kind of made them small, so they're very interactive, but we have just kind of a general best practice. We have a finance, a communications, a new authorizer community of practice, and then one for kind of the whole application cycle. So those have been great. Taking lots of notes and bringing that kind of back to our policy as we're developing it. And then finally, I just wanted to mention we have a couple conference opportunities coming up for members, and a few of you taking advantage already of the National Charter Schools Institute Bold by Choice Summit, which is April 27th to 29th in Grand Rapids. I'm really looking forward to that. They do a phenomenal job with their content, and it's usually a nice size where you get a chance to connect with others in similar roles and really have an opportunity to have some deeper discussions with other folks that are implementing it. So Member Rutt, Member Lindenlaub, and Member Forrester Frank are all attending, as well as myself, and open to any others still who would want to attend that. So please just reach out and let me know, and I will facilitate your registration. And then finally, the National Charter Schools Conference is occurring this June 24th to 26th in New Orleans. And that is a huge conference. I'm going to guess maybe around 5,000. And it goes anywhere from teachers in charter schools to authorizers, CEOs of charter management organizations and employees. Everyone who's involved comes to that conference. And I guess my plug for that is it's big. So there's a session for anything you want, and probably multiple. And also it really gives you a sense of the movement, and they just do a great job really capturing the essence of how charters fit into the public education landscape. So again, if anyone wants to attend that, let me know and we'll go through the approval process and get you registered. And that is all I have for today. So any other questions?
All right, it looks like we're good to go. Thank you so much, Kathy. That's terrific. Okay, you guys, we're going to move on to item 6. And this is a new part of our meetings that we decided to integrate, having a regular update from the Board of Public Education, just so we can keep our, our attention on what they're doing in a very easy way, which is in our meetings and having McCall here. So I want to welcome McCall and turn it over to you for your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I really appreciate it. When I had first asked the chair and Kathy what they wanted me to share with all of you, they thought it would be good for me to give a little bit of a highlight of what the board actually does. They thought it would actually also be really good to kind of share a little bit about how we coordinate and the similarities and differences with the Office of Public Instruction, and then share some of the policy items that we've been working on. As you know, our agendas are quite lengthy, so I just chose a couple of the ones that are kind of top of mind. I'm not going to go into great detail, but obviously if you guys have questions or want more information, I'm happy to go into that information. I believe we're on page 163 of your packet for those of you who are following along. But really just to kind of kick us off, who is the Board of Public Ed? We're in the Constitution, Article 10, Section 9. Our role there is really to exercise general supervision over the public school system. Pretty vague, right? I think we all can agree to that. Key aspects of the Board of Public Ed, the composition of the board, there's 7 members appointed by the governor. They are confirmed by the Senate. No more than 4 of them can be from the same political party. No more than 4 of them can be from 2 specified districts. Those districts are actually in statute. They're not the 2 districts that you would actually think, like our congressional districts. And that district map changes from time to time. We also have ex officio members, the governor, the commissioner of higher ed, superintendent of public instruction, all are non-voting members. You'll hear me talk a lot about the superintendent of public instruction. The current superintendent was actually our former vice chair of the Board of Public Ed, so we have a great working relationship with her right now. And back in the 70s, the Board of Public Ed actually created a position for an ex officio non-voting student representative. So we've had a student representative on our board for quite a long time as well. It's chosen by the Montana Association of Student Councils, so the Board of Public Ed has no voice, frankly, in that student rep position. And I can vouch for that because I often go and sit in on those meetings, and you would think I'm not even in the room. And those students really take pride in how that their fellow student is chosen for that position. And I think it's great. It's a really fun process to watch. And actually, fun fact, the first student rep chosen to the Board of Public Education was former Governor Steve Bullock. Powers and duties of the Board of Public Ed, there's so many, but I think just to kind of wrap it up is, in addition to exercising that general supervision over the public schools, the board adopts a number of standards. Really, some of the highlights are accreditation standards. We're responsible for teacher licensure and specialist certification. We also do suspension and revocation. You guys talked a lot about hearings today. If you want any insight on hearing protocols, we are your people. We administer professional educator preparation program standards for higher education. We determine policies for the design, construction, and operation of school buses. Bet you didn't know that. We adopt the rules for statewide assessment. We talked a lot about assessment today. And then we set a standards for the early childhood education programs. The board also acts as the governing agency or the school board for the Montana School for the Deaf and Blind in Great Falls. And that's one of the things that we actually spend a lot of time on is our administration of the School for the Deaf and Blind. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our relationship with the Office of Public Instruction. both play central roles in Montana K-12 education system, no doubt about that. We both have distinct constitutional origins, structures, responsibilities. Some of our similarities, we are both constitutional entities. Both are established in the Montana Constitution in Article 10, though I will note a caveat, the Office of Public Instruction is not noted in the Constitution. Rather, it is the Superintendent of Public Instruction that is. Both influence K-12 education policy statewide. Each has the authority affecting accreditation standards, funding implementation, compliance with state and federal law. We both interact with school districts and education stakeholders. I think you guys have worked, across both parties in those capacities. They work with districts, administrators, teachers, legislators, and the public. Both of us operate with Montana's public education governance structures as well. Although structured differently, we both function as state level education authorities. Some of the key differences, our leadership structures are very different. The Office of Public Instruction is led by one person, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. She's elected statewide, functions as a single executive office model. Our board is governed by a board appointed by members and operates as multi-member policy board, overseen by a director who manages the agency and board activities. So very different in oversight. The core functions are also a little bit different. Office of Public Instruction administers state and federal education funds. They provide technical assistance to districts. They collect and report education data, implement federal programs like ESSA, and they execute policy and rules. Think they have like the operational agency piece of that. The Board of Public Education adopts administrative rules for K-12 education. We set accreditation standards, approve educator licensure standards. We oversee certain specialized schools, like I said, MSDB, and we hear certain appeals. Think policy setting, regulatory body. And then when it comes to rulemaking, we're also very different. This probably has some of the most important distinctions. The Board of Public Ed has primary constitutional authority to adopt rules for supervision and control of the public school system. And the Office of Public Instruction may propose and administer rules, but the board generally adopts those. In simple terms, like OPI will typically draft and implement. The board adopts and governs those. So I was thinking about good analogies to present about how we work together. So if Montana's education system were a ship, the Board of Public Ed would set the course and we would establish the rules for the navigation of the course. The Board of Public Education would operate the ship from day to day, and they would ensure that it stays on the course. And so, why does that all matter? It's because Montana intentionally separates the policy authority, like the Board of Public Ed, from the administrative execution, which is OPI. And I think the division really balances between the governance and the management with the state's public education system. Now, I obviously didn't write any of these rules long ago, but I do think that there was probably some method to the madness at one time. And I think that there are, ways in which a lot of the separation and division can go wrong, but we've also seen that it can work really well. So, right now we're working really well with our superintendent and the Office of Public Instruction, the Board of Public Ed, do find that we work well together as well. So some policy highlights now. I'm going to go into the information in your packet. I've shared a lot about the general roles and responsibilities of the board. I thought it'd be great to share a few of the items that we've been top of mind for the Board of Public Ed. Accreditation's always one that's top of mind for us. Frankly, we talk about it frequently at Board of Public Ed meetings in one way or another. We're on page 164 of your packet. This is a recommendation from the Office of Public Instruction. Currently, we're really talking about revising and reforming the intensive assistance process. And it's really pertaining to the accreditation of schools who are in the intensive assistance process. And this is really thinking about what those schools need to do to get out of that intensive assistance process. The definition for accreditation in Montana is defined in our administrative rules as certification by the Board of Public Education that a school meets the adopted standards of the Board of Public Education for a specified school year. So pretty simple. What you see in your packet is a process for schools who find themselves in the intensive assistance category, like I mentioned, which means that the school has failed to meet the requirements of their corrective action plan, which you all talked a lot about today, and is at risk of reaching non-accredited status. I think in terms of choice schools, as you were talking about it, it's very similar, right? You guys were talking about revocation of your charter. This is really talking about accreditation of the school in general. So now you might wonder, what does non-accreditation status mean? Well, for the most basic terms, they would lose A and B or per pupil funding, and that's what's listed in statute. And they would also lose the ability to participate in extracurricular activities as sanctioned by the Montana High School Association. And that's a decision by the MHSA. So to many schools, those losses are, they're huge. They would completely devastate a school system. And so the recommendation in your packet, and specifically the timeline that's beginning on, I think it's page 167, really outlines a process that could be supportive to schools that are placed in this intensive assistance process. They'll have 1 year for systems analysis and innovative planning. It's then followed by 3 years of plan implementation with biennial progress updates before either exiting intensive assistance or being recommended for non-accreditation. So the board has made some recommendations and proposed some revisions to the information that's in your document. So I don't want you to think that this is the final document that's before the board for their action. So I do think that this could potentially change a bit before the board takes some action on it. Specifically, I think it's the last few steps that are in there around the appeal language, because the board can't really take an appeal on an action that they've already made. So there's some mess with that language in there, but I do anticipate some potential revisions, like I said, and then they will take action at their meeting in March. So fairly soon on what this process will mean, and then it will go into effect after the board takes action on the categories of accreditation at their meeting in May. So very shortly on the determination of whether folks will go into this or schools will go into this or not. I'm gonna wait to take questions until I get to the end, unless you want me to pause now before I go into the other two, Madam Chair.
Do you mind taking a question right now?
No, I don't mind.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So you were saying that the board is going to be looking at this in March. So I'm wondering, how different is this than what they already have in place?
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's a great question. Currently, what's in place, the categories of accreditation are the same. So intensive assistance currently exists. What's different is that the board has not had in place this level of support and the requirements for like a third-party support system and the level of additional required reports and working with community. And the board, frankly, has not non-accredited in this type of way as well. In my time, I've not ever been around when they have non-accredited school. I have found articles where they have non-accredited, but it was not a public school that they non-accredited. And as you know, a lot of private schools go through accreditation so that they can participate in Montana High School Association. And those are typically secondary schools so that they can play sports and participate in activities. And so that's typically what happens. So I've not seen where a public school has been non-accredited. So that would be huge. And that would be certainly new to this process.
Okay. Chip has a question too.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Executive Director Flynn. My question is, I'll show my ignorance here. In the vision statement for accreditation, it says, in collaboration with its community, each school develops a plan reflecting its unique strengths and needs using backward mapping and transparent progress markers. Could you tell me what is backward mapping, please?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Member Lindenlob, I think what they're trying to get at here is really coming up with a plan where they're coming up with outcomes and then they're backward mapping to how they're going to successfully reach those outcomes. And they're working with community members, and they're really, they're getting more outside of just those walls of their school, because this really does become more than just a school problem. If they are non-accredited, it becomes a community problem. Because like I said, oftentimes this could, decimate an entire school system. If they become non-accredited, it's not just an individual school. So it becomes then a community problem. So I think they're thinking bringing in more people than just those of the school itself. And I think that's what they're trying to get at as far as the backwards mapping.
That's great. Okay. One more question before we move on the summary of the intensive assistant timeline and the various steps. You said step 2, which is bringing in the third party entity to work with the district or with the board in order to get, right everything. I'm presuming that's instead of going into receivership, which other states do, where the Board of Public Education actually, or the state, takes over the district and does that work themselves. And so my next question is, how does that get funded, bringing in a third party?
Madam Chair, that's a great question. So you're totally on the right track. This is very similar to what you would think of as a takeover. And rather than like a state takeover, I mean, the Board of Public Ed is certainly not positioned to take over a school in the type of capacity that you're probably thinking about. And so what this would look like is support from the Office of Public Instruction in coordination with a third-party entity. Think somebody like Cognia. I'm using them as an example because there's a lot of our schools currently use them. So I'm not saying that they are,
right,
the only ones. There certainly could be others. But a group like Cognia that could really help them do a diagnostic on, the work that needs to be done in their school district. When it comes to funding, a lot of these schools could be receiving funding from the federal government already, because intensive assistance is actually a federal term that's used for federal accountability. And so if they're in intensive assistance, they typically already receiving federal funds to support the federal accountability system. And so we've actually talked a lot about where the funds are coming from, and our board members have had these same questions. And what we've heard from the Office of Public Instruction is their goal is to really help these schools better utilize those funds to pay for these third parties. But they also are willing to support them with funding that they also receive in similar ways from the federal government. So I don't have a good answer for you on the funding because I don't completely, it's not something that we typically weigh in on, but that's my understanding from the information that they've shared with us.
That makes sense. And I didn't mean to get too much in the weeds. It's just so interesting. Okay.
Nope, it's a good question. Because
any more
questions?
Okay, you can move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are really good questions from all of you. And frankly, those are the same questions our board members have had. So you're right on target. Next, I'm going to move on to early targeted interventions. This is one of the policy areas that have been really fun for our board members to work on. In 2023, legislation was enacted to support third grade reading proficiency. The bill established new responsibilities for the Board of Public Education, which included identifying evaluation methodology to determine whether a child was performing at, above, or below developmentally trajectory, leading to reading proficiency upon completion of third grade. I want to point out that this was only for reading in the first year. And so our board really worked to design a framework for the Jumpstart programs and early targeted literacy intervention in schools, as well as a home-based early literacy program. Schools also received an additional A and B if they were to implement that classroom-based program. And they also received an additional quarter A and B for that summer Jumpstart program. So there was certainly some initiative for those, or incentive for those schools if they were to implement this program because they would receive some extra funds. So building upon this foundation, the legislature in 2025 thought, why did we just stop at early literacy? Math is just important. So they also decided to pass and support third grade numeracy proficiency. So the bill in 2025 established basically all the same duties and responsibilities to the Board of Public Ed, not just this time on literacy, but also on numeracy. So the board created in 2023 an early literacy, at the time it was Early Literacy Advisory Council, to review legislation, determine rulemaking proposals, and really recommend all the statutory requirements to implement all the revisions to the law. I'm going to speak in terms of that the council did all of these things at once, but you should know that in 2023, they did things pertaining to literacy. In 2025, took actions pertaining to numeracy, because it was the same committee basically that did the work, or the same council that did the work both years. And so rather than taking you through the same steps both times, I'm just going to speak sort of globally at once. But you'll see in your packet that you'll find the rules recommended by the advisory council, and that were adopted by the Board of Public Ed. I think it's on page 170. The administrative rules include the standards for the evaluation methodology for the early literacy and numeracy interventions, as well as the summer jumpstart programs. And I want to note too, this isn't universal preschool, and that's why these evaluation methodologies had to be created, because there was eligibility and evaluation methodology, including required skills that all had to be determined for both literacy and numeracy in order for students to be entered into the program. So in September 2025, the Office of Public Instruction actually put out a report, which at the time only included data for literacy because numeracy wasn't quite implemented yet. But it stated over 3,300 students participated in the early targeted intervention programs. Now, I realize that doesn't seem like a lot of students, but I think a lot of this was new still for a lot of our schools, trying to wrap their heads around how they were going to find extra space, resources as far as educators and funds to get this off the ground. But I do anticipate the numbers are going to increase as schools learn a little bit more about the opportunities. And I think why this was so fun and maybe a little challenging initially for our board members was we don't typically get to jump into policy areas like this. We really sit at the 30,000 foot area when it comes to standards. And, we live kind of in the same standards over and over and over again. And oftentimes, we find best practices from the national groups that come to us, in the same areas, like I said, accreditation and assessment and licensure. And so this was something that was like really fun and new and challenging, I think, for the board members to sort of wrap their minds around, and specifically for me to really work with experts and really think through some things that, like I said, were new and exciting in early literacy and early numeracy. And so what you see in front of you is new rules that the board has adopted and are in our standards now, and will be updated, I suppose, as legislation changes. Just really exciting for us to get to work on. Madam Chair, I'll pause and see if there are questions.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, you can go on.
Thank you. And then lastly, one of the newest, and again, very exciting, on page 174 of your packet is a proposed rulemaking for the Class 9 Special Education Technician license. I know you guys have been talking a lot about special education, so I thought this would be very fun and top of mind for you all to include as a new policy area. But this new license came at the recommendation of the Office of Public Instruction, and the intent is to really increase the capacity of Montana's paraprofessionals to provide a higher level of support to our Montana students with disabilities. And in particular, the purpose is to really certify a technician who meets the requirements to provide technical services to a special education supervising teacher. The pathway is currently not available through any other classification of licenses under the authority of the Board of Public Ed, and it definitely has different skills than a paraprofessional, which is why there was, we were trying to find a different pathway for this to exist. The last classification of licensure that the Board of Public Education actually adopted was in 2008, and that was the Class 8 dual credit post-secondary faculty license. So we don't just add new classifications very often. And so I would point out that this is a pretty special circumstance. And we had a lot of conversations before the Office of Public Instruction actually brought this to the board for rulemaking, because they wanted to make sure that this was the right pathway in the right area to put this, and not try to carve out special pathway under the paraprofessional area for this, because the Office of Public Instruction and the Board of Public Ed thought that this made a lot of sense to highlight the specialist sort of instruction and pathway it would really take for this person to become educated. And so the information that you see on in your packet on 174 is currently submitted for administrative rule for notice of proposed public hearing. It's currently out there in administrative rules. We have a public hearing on it, I believe, in a couple weeks. And we don't have any comments thus far. Should we not receive any comments, it will be adopted pretty easily and should be ready for people to be applying for this license before the end of this semester. So really excited to get moving on this, and thought you all would be excited to hear about this pathway as well. Madam Chair, turn it over to you for questions.
Great. Yeah, I have a question. So how different is this Class 9 special ed technical license from just a traditional paraprofessional's license?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is very different than a typical paraprofessional. And if you look in your packet, you'll see all of the different requirements that this person would have to go through for training. Specifically, they'd have to complete some specific online modules. Mm-hmm. They'd have to have proof of a certain number of hours for documented special education work. Additionally, they'd have to have verification of institutionally accredited courses in education. And then they'd also have to have the completion of the online course, An Introduction to Indian Education for All. And I will say that is a requirement for every single one of our licensure areas, regardless of which one it is. And I believe all of those are exceptions for our paraprofessional.
Great. Chip.
My question was, thank you, Madam Chair, was just quickly, how does it, so much of special ed, I know when we were discussing this, is federal law. And is there any federal law regarding certification of special education like that? It seems like a great idea, but assistance in this case.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Member Lindenlaub, that's a really great question. And there are going to be some follow-up information that the Board of Public Education will have to include in our accreditation standards following the passage of this information in our educator licensure standards. And that information is actually going to have to be specifically in the, give me 1 second if you don't mind. It's under the school leadership piece of the accreditation standards. And what the Board of Public Ed will have to do is we'll have to create specific language around the supervisor requirements and the technician requirements and how the two of them actually work together, because there's going to be specific duties of what the technician can do and what the supervisor can do. And I mean, your question's a great one, and we know that we have to do that immediately following this. And the Office of Public Instruction wanted to make sure that this license went first, so that students who are in this program or people who are in this program right now could apply by the end of the year, and that Chapter 55, the accreditation standards, could follow right after. So we will have to open our accreditation standards. We could do it honestly at our May meeting. We could do it at our March meeting, but we will have to do that immediately following the passage of this to make sure that we can differentiate the two of those.
Thank you.
And so McCall, on the cover page here, it says that there's the hearing on March 3rd. Is this one of those hearings where you sit in a room alone with a video going and you read through everything?
Madam Chair, it is one of those hearings. And I have resorted to not sitting in a room alone by myself anymore, and I'm just doing them on Zoom. But I do Zoom alone
Right.
by myself. And yes, it is one of those hearings.
Okay, well, I think that's cool. I love watching those. And I think that I just want to recommend everyone, since we've been alerted to this, it's really an interesting part of, of Montana laws of transparency, being able to watch this and see this, and of course, make comments if you want to. That's always an option. So I see there's a Zoom link right here. So it's probably on the BPE webpage too. So I encourage you guys to learn something new by watching. It's cool. All right.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll take the liberty to say that the script is quite long that I have to read to notify the public of all of the things that we are required to say when it comes to making comments on changes to administrative rule. And the board, I think also the Board of Public Ed chooses to go through that process. As a constitutional body, we don't have to, we aren't required to, but we also like the idea that how transparent it is, so we choose to go through that.
Excellent. Okay. Any other questions for McCall? All right, it looks like we're good. McCall, thank you so much for that. I look forward to having this piece each time. I think it's really good for us to be more knowledgeable about, the Board of Public Education and all of that. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And if any members are curious about any other section of the things that we're doing, please let me know. I'm always happy to take suggestions. So thank you.
Great. Okay, so that brings us to public comment. I just want to use this time to see if any of the attendees would like to provide public comment at the end of this meeting. Looks like we're clear. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for attending. It really matters to us, and we appreciate you taking your time to watch the activities of the commission. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for your participation in the meeting today. And I'd also like to thank McCall and her staff at the BPE for their continued support and active participation in our meetings and operations. And of course, I'd like to thank all of the commission members for their service to the state and for their commitment to improving public school options in Montana. And I just want to remind you guys that shortly you will receive an email from Kathy requesting an evaluation for today's meeting. And the input from these evaluations is very helpful to Kathy and to the chair in planning future meetings and striving to be better each time. And also I want to note, when you're doing that evaluation, think about how different was it this time that we stayed in Robert's rules rather than having it be a little bit more open. If I was saying, the point of it is that it's going to feel slow at first, but the idea is to go slow to move fast. And it looks like we are ahead of schedule by a few minutes. So that's good. It may have worked. So feel free to make a comment about that in your evaluation. And other than that, I want you guys to have a wonderful rest of your winter, and that we will reconvene in the spring to complete more business. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks. Bye-bye.